may not realize how good he has been defensively for us since we've come back. And I think it's also elevated his offensive play just because his scoring rates are elevated now to a real strong level where he would produce at, like, I think 105-point pace right now.
That was Jim Montgomery yesterday on the Fast Lane. If you missed any of their conversation, it was a damn good one. Check it out on the podcast page. 101ESPN.com and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it with Alex and T-Bone. I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex, Robert Thomas is driving the bus again. That is what the head coach said yesterday on the Fast Lane. What have you made of Robert Thomas's recent performance? Because we were critical of him lately. About a month ago, we were talking about what happened here. Why doesn't this look right? Well, it appears the answer is he wasn't healthy. That's always something you've got to have in the back of your mind as you're watching these guys that you know to be good players go through some significant struggles. He had one goal over the course of like a month span. He's like a -5 in that stretch, and that was when the Blues started to have their downward spiral. What have you seen that has changed for Robert Thomas in his recent performance compared to what it was when we were talking about the core potentially getting shaken up once again?
He's back to being a Selke candidate. That's what I'm seeing. You could look at the offense and the points that he's putting up, and those happen because he's so good defensively. I'm going to go through some of these games that they've played since the Four Nations tournament and tell you how many points that their top players got. Colorado.
Talking about the opposition.
Yeah, the opposition. Colorado, 0 points for McKinnon and Natchez. The Seattle Kraken, 0 points for Matty Beniers and for Jaden Schwartz. Washington Capitals, 0 points for Ovechkin, Strome, and Protas. The LA Kings game, 0 points for Ajay Kopitar and Alex Turcotte. The Dallas Stars game, 0 points for Rope Hintz other than on the power play. So what's happened? Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich are now back to being not only the top producing line. I almost just blanked out there for a minute. They're back to being the eliminators. They're eliminating the other opposition, which is opening up the ice time and the opportunities to score goals on the other end. I saw somebody tweet out the numbers of Robert Thomas's line since the Four Nations break on Natural Stat Trick, and like you could make an argument for the Selke Trophy just in these 9 games for the Corsi rating for, the Corsi rating against, and the high danger scoring chances for and against. So yeah, he's back to being a number 1 centerman, and that's not meaning he's back to being a guy that Jim Montgomery pointed out could put up 100 points. No, he's back to being a guy that if he's healthy for a full season, he's going to be in the Selke Trophy conversation. And you can't take the offensive step unless you've got the defensive step, and that's where I feel like you're seeing Robert Thomas emerge.
Man, if there's a theme for this team, that's it. What you just said there. Think about what Kyrou has done with his game this year. You can't take the offensive step without first getting that defensive side of the step as well. T-Bone, what stood out to you so far?
I think for me, since the Four Nations break, which first off, I didn't even realize those defensive numbers. I mean, I knew he had been playing well, that line had defensively. That's freaking insane. Yeah. On top of that, it's been the driving of the offense right now. He looks like himself. Him and Buchnevich finally look like that pairing that we have seen in the past. That's what has stood out to me is finally you've got the Batman actually being Batman. He's no longer just Bruce Wayne. And he's also got his Robin with him now. And that had been the problem for them, especially in that weird stretch right before that Four Nations tournament where they really started to fall out of this thing. Thomas wasn't healthy, wasn't playing well at all, and he wasn't being a distributor. He had one goal in I don't remember what the stretch was we looked at earlier in the office. But
basically a month.
Yeah, and like that to me, like if you told me, hey, Thomas scores 1 goal in a month, that would be down, but I wouldn't be necessarily completely shocked by that because he is a pass-first guy. He just didn't have the assist during that month, which means that line wasn't generating any offense at all. So what I've seen is he's now got his guy in Buchnevich that's healthy, and he's back to his full-force self, which is, hey, I'm going to go up against the toughest matchups. I'm going to lock down that line, and while I'm doing that, I'm going to walk all over them in the offensive zone as well, and I'm going to put up points and get the production we need.
So shots, when that top line, Alex, to your point, is on the ice in this post-Four Nations face-off stretch of games for the Blues.
You could make a Selke Trophy in 9 games.
49 shots, 435 shots against. This is all at 5-on-5. Goals, 8-2 in favor of the Blues. Scoring chances, 57-44 in favor of the Blues. And I think this, to me, is the most telling stat. In 9 games, more than 100 minutes on the ice for the Blues' top line since the Four Nation face-off. The Blues have 24 high-danger chances with that trio, Booch, Booch, Thomas, and Neighbors on the ice. 24 high danger chances. The opposition, 14.
Ooh, buddy.
14 total high danger chances in 105 minutes on the ice, which is nearly basically, if you're looking at even strength, it's effectively 2 full games of them going up against the opponent's top line typically. Mm-hmm. They have 14 high danger chances against them. That's the story. This is the story of what the Blues have become in the post-Four Nations break. They are a great, borderline elite goal suppression team. They do not allow you to get into the high danger areas. Jordan Binnington has been fantastic for them. And who's leading the charge? It is nobody other than Robert Thomas. Mm-hmm. He's the guy that's making this all possible. Since that break, and this is not including the last 2 games, things have changed over this stretch. We'll talk about that as we go along today. They have had a legit number 1 center in Robert Thomas. They have had a legit go-to number 1 defenseman in Colton Parayko. Obviously, that shifted. And they have had a Stanley Cup, Vezina Trophy caliber goalie in Jordan Binnington. And when you have those 3 pieces, everything else starts to fit into place. It's like going into a season with a Hall of Fame level quarterback in the NFL, or a top 5 player in the NBA, or a Cy Young candidate and an MVP candidate in Major League Baseball. If you've got those pieces in place, you can dream as a fan base. And the Blues, for a really long time now, have not felt like they for sure have those pieces in place. There's been questions about the number 1 center. There's been questions about the number 1 defenseman. At times, if we're being honest, there's been questions about that goalie as well. Right now, and I don't know how long this is going to be the case, but right now, you feel pretty good about those 3 spots, setting aside the Parayko thing because of the injuries right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have a number 1 center, you're not going to have success. And what I mean by that is you've got to have a guy who can be effective in both ends of the ice. The goaltender obviously is very important, and we've learned the number 1 defenseman. But the defenseman and the goaltender can't stop all of the offense. You've got to have the 5-man unit out there. And the perfect example for me is what Nathan MacKinnon has become. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time. When they drafted MacKinnon first overall, the Avalanche made the playoffs the first year, but that team had Ryan O'Reilly, Matt Duchene, and Nathan MacKinnon down the middle. Had a lot of depth to it. But then all those guys left. And for the next 3 years, the Colorado Avalanche missed the playoffs, and MacKinnon wasn't even a point-per-game player. And it wasn't until the 2017-2018 season that he became the 90-plus point player, and he became a two-way centerman that could defend in the other end of the ice. Once you get it, though, the Colorado Avalanche have never missed the playoffs since. When you find it, then you can build everything else around it. The Chicago Blackhawks are the exact same example. They drafted Patrick Kane, felt like they had the goal scorer, but they still needed the centerman. They get him the next year, and then look what Chicago does the rest of the way. When you get a guy that is a point-per-game player, that is a guy who can eliminate the other team's top lines, you're setting yourself up for success for the length of his career. Anze Kopitar, Patrice Bergeron, perfect examples of this. That's what Robert Thomas has played like. I know in December it was good and in January it was bad. I think a lot of that was just fatigue with the injury that kicked in with him. You are seeing now a more focused and motivated Robert Thomas, and when that happens, it makes Neighbors better, it makes Buchnevich better, it makes the defenseman better, and it makes the goaltender better.
So the Blues now have 17 games remaining the rest of the way. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line to get involved in the show. Alex, JR had a really good piece up earlier today over on The Athletic, and he broke down what the Blues have done against the teams that remain on their schedule. They have the easiest strength of schedule remaining this year, and so far in 28 games against those opponents that they still have on their schedule, they have gone a combined 15, 11, and 2. Now, that would not be good enough. That points percentage would not get them into the playoffs this year if they do the exact same thing the rest of the way. However, they are not the same team today that they were against those teams earlier in the season. So they've got to be better, and I think they probably will be a little better than they had been. It's also worth noting that a lot of those losses have come against 2 teams. The Blues are 0-3 this year against the Minnesota Wild. So if you can't do this, but if you cross them off of this list, say, okay, we'll see what they do there, you suddenly are 15-8-2 against this schedule. You also went 1-2 this year against Utah. So if you cross them off of the list as well, you're looking at a group that has been 14-6-2 against the remaining teams that are on your schedule earlier this season. If you go by that points percentage the rest of the way, it would give you 24 points with 2 more games to play against Minnesota and Utah. Excuse me, it's 22 points. You add in one win against those two teams, go 1-1 against Utah and Minnesota, you're up to 24 points. That gets you to 93 points on the season. Do you think this team has that kind of a run in them the rest of the way, Alex?
Yeah.
24 points in the rest of their games this year.
I do. You probably should have asked T-Bone first, but yes, me. I do. I look at the schedule, and I see this team having that type of run in them. I do think there's a couple of trap games that the Blues need to be very careful with. One of those being Chicago, Nashville back-to-back that they have next weekend. And then one of those is that Detroit-Pittsburgh stretch where you're on home ice before you play Colorado, Winnipeg, Edmonton. But I have to go off of what I've seen, and I haven't seen it for 2 games and then it's fallen off. I've seen it for 9 consecutive games. The team seems motivated. They see the scheme that's working in place, and even without a Colton Parayko, which we saw them play against Anaheim and against the LA Kings, the system they have in place gives them an opportunity to stay competitive with the game. So unless I see a massive dip off of what they've played like versus what they are this final 17 stretch, yeah, I think this team can go out there and pick up 14 wins or 13 wins, something like that down the stretch.
Yeah, I think they can do it as well. And I think it is 5-on-5. They've been playing such great hockey that I think they're going to be able to get through this. And I understand the Parayko loss will add to some skepticism around them. I kind of agree with what Alex is saying. I think the system really showed itself in that Kings game last weekend when they didn't have Parayko, they didn't have Fowler, and they still were able. They had a bad second period. First period, though, they held the Kings to, I think it was like 3 shots on goal. I think they can sustain this, and even without Parayko, it's such an easy schedule. It's the easiest schedule left in the NHL. I think they will be able to sustain this pace because I don't think, even without Parayko, I don't think those teams suddenly bump up even to you. I think they end up getting into the playoffs with this.
You got to go 11-4-2.
I think they can do it.
I think they can do it.
11-4-2.
Go ahead, Brandon. Say it with your chest.
Yeah, no, please, actually, say it. Do it. Lean into it.
I so badly want you guys to be right. So badly do I want you guys to be correct. No Parayko, 11-4-2 the rest of the way. I know you've got the weakest strength of schedule remaining this year. I said this on Friday, though, when we had our show leading into the deadline. I don't think this team has that kind of a run in them without their number 1 defenseman. I said, what changed for them? Well, they have a number 1 center, a number 1 defenseman, a number 1 goalie, and everything else fits into place from there. You no longer have that number 1 defenseman in place. Maybe Philip Broberg can replace him. Sure. Right. But now everybody else gets put up a notch. So, yes, it was Parayko is your number 1 defenseman. Broberg is your number 2 defenseman. And you can piece things together from there. Fowler is number 3. Falk is number 4. It just takes a lot for them to be able to overcome a loss like this and play at that level of hockey. And even if you miss the playoffs this year, I don't think that means this season has been a failure. I don't. You've had too many guys step up in a meaningful way. Thomas, what we've seen from him is incredibly encouraging and needed by this fan base, given how we saw him play for more than a month. Pavel Buchnevich looking like a top-line player again. Needed. Desperately needed. And maybe every bit as importantly is the young players that have emerged. I mentioned Broberg. Holloway's been great. Kyrou looks like a legit 200-foot player right now. They have had so many positive returns this year. And yes, I'm saying this to cover my own ass because I'm telling you, I don't think they're making the playoffs.
No, that's okay. No, that's good.
Oh, wait,
this is good. This is very good, ladies and gentlemen.
Playoff bound St. Louis.
No, don't you even look at it.
Anybody else want this? Anybody else want
I'm
this?
burning
Put it on.
I'm burning it and taking it home. I'm taking it home, and it will go in the bonfire.
I do not think this team has an 11-4-2 run in them, but if they do, man, God, would that be fun as hell. It'd be fun as hell to cover. I would enjoy the heck out of every moment of it. I just don't see it happening, so we will see. Blues back in action tomorrow night against the Penguins on the road. It's an early one. Pre-game starting at 5, puck drop at 6, right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. 3 road games in their next 4 games. This has been a team that has really succeeded on the road, so we'll see if they're able to take advantage in these ones.
And the reason the optimism over here is, like, you look at these teams, the Blues have been better 5-on-5 than all of these teams. And this is kind of resemblance of that 18-19 run because that team was bad on the power play. Hold on. Hold on.
Look, man, I love you. I think
Shut up.
It's closer to 22. It's closer to 22.
No.
Let's not compare anything to the 20. It's like comparing things to the 2011
No.
Cardinals. Don't do it. No, nobody compares.
You did that, but what I'm saying is that team in the year that will not be named was awful on the power play. But you know how they got through? They got through on the 5-on-5 unit, and that's where I think this team is going to succeed.
Didn't they have a great penalty kill?
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
I thought maybe that was.
They were elite at goal suppression, but don't worry about it. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. The YouTube chat is available for you as always at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll get into some NFL quick hitters, including a former All-Pro defensive end who just signed with a Super Bowl contender. We'll tell you who that is, what he got coming up in 15 minutes. But next, how should the Cardinals approach their leadoff spot to open up the season? It sure sounds like they might be toying with the idea of going with somebody other than Mason Wynn. Is that the smart option? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, so a big conversation that we're going to have about the Cardinals going into the season is who's going to bat leadoff. Now, for some in the audience, I think the answer is pretty obvious. It's Mason Wynn. He's a guy that everybody liked watching last year. He's a super easy guy to root for. And as a hitter, he seems to profile that way. He gets a high average because of his contact rates. He is somebody that does have the speed that you typically expect. And just old school baseball, hey, man, defense first shortstop that makes contact and runs on the bases, yeah, that feels like a leadoff hitter, traditionally speaking. So he has all of the attributes that you would typically expect. But that is more the old school versus the new school approach for leadoff hitter. I'm not telling you one is right and the other is wrong, but just there are going to be different appetites for different people that watch the game a little differently. So Mason Wynn is not necessarily locked in as this guy, so much so that earlier today over on the St. Louis Post-Dispatch website, Derek Gould wrote about the conundrum for the Cardinals, which is basically, hey, how do you get your on-base percentage up in that leadoff spot? Because last year the Cardinals had an on-base percentage, not a batting average, an on-base percentage from their leadoff spot of .292.
That's a great batting average.
That was the second worst in all of Major League Baseball. It was the worst in the National League. The only team that was worse than them from their leadoff spot was the Kansas City Royals, who had a brutal .270 on-base percentage from their leadoff hitter, which is the worst that I can find in at least the last 7 years. Nice. It's not what you want if you're a contender. What'd they do? They went on to the offseason and found a new leadoff hitter because they could not do that again. All right, so I said the Cardinals, .292 on-base percentage from their leadoff hitters last year. Here's the worst on-base percentage by teams in their leadoff spot in recent seasons. 23. Detroit Tigers, .290. How'd they do, guys?
What year?
2023, Detroit Tigers.
Made the playoffs.
Yeah,
They were horrific.
2024.
2022, Oakland Athletics, .282. 2021, Texas
Vegas.
Rangers. This is before they got good. This is when they were awful.
I think they lost 100.
Did they go get
280.
Simeon after that?
Set aside the COVID season in 2020 because it's only 60 games. 2019, nobody had a worse on-base percentage than the Cardinals did last year. In 2018, the San Francisco Giants were at .291. Again, not a good team that year. When you have this kind of an on-base percentage from your leadoff spot, it does not bode well for your team. A, it symbolizes that you've got a bad lineup. And B, it means that the guys that are in the middle of your order have fewer opportunities to drive anybody in. Last year, Mason Wynn was the reason for this low on-base percentage. There's just no way around it.
Did you just take a shot at your guy?
I love Mason Wynn. I think he's a great player, and I think he's going to be a super valuable piece for the Cardinals for years to come. I do not think he's a leadoff hitter, at least not as he currently hits. When he was in the leadoff spot last year, he had a .248 batting average and a .290 on-base percentage. That was a below-league average hitter. He walked just 6% of the time. To me, that is a guy that I want batting lower in my order. I want him batting 7, 8, 9. And that is not a shot against Mason Wynn. It's what Jeremy Pena does for the Houston Astros. If you're going to be a good team, that's probably where Mason Wynn profiles to be a hitter, unless he changes his profile, which I don't necessarily want. I like that he's aggressive at the plate. I don't want him to change who he is to become a different version of himself. We've seen that impact hitters in a bad way. I'm thinking of Matt Carpenter, who just becomes too home run happy when he goes more towards the middle of the order as opposed to being at the top. I think Brendan Donovan and Lars Nootbaar are your two guys that profile best to be at the top of your order. And honestly, if he keeps hitting the way that he has in spring training, Victor Scott profiles better as a leadoff hitter because he gets on base at a higher clip than Mason Wynn does. And this is not just based on what they're doing in spring training. It's what they did in the minors. Wynn is just a far more aggressive hitter. He is closer to Alec Burleson than he is Brendan Donovan or Lars Nootbaar. When you guys think about how the Cardinals should approach this, who do you think profiles best in that spot?
Brendan Donovan. I'm not putting Victor Scott in that, even if he has a great spring, because as we've seen, that's a pretty big pressure cooker to put somebody in at the beginning of the season. And for Victor Scott, if you're in the lineup, I just need you to focus on being an everyday major leaguer. Don't worry about being the guy that starts games for us. I'm going to Brendan Donovan because he's done it before, and he's been good at it before. You want high on-base percentage? He's got it. You want potential pop? He's got it. I'm also not going to do that with Lars Nootbaar because I think Lars Nootbaar, if he can stay healthy, has the pop to be maybe in the middle of the order for you. So I would go Brendan Donovan. He's got speed. He's got smarts on the base paths. He's got the ability to make contact. He can work the count if he needs to, i.e. what Matt Carpenter used to do so well, go from an 0-2 count to a 3-2 count. I'd go Brendan Donovan. And I'm with you. Mason Wynn, you're my 9-hole hitter or my 8-hole hitter. If I can go 8-9 with Mason Wynn and Victor Scott and have Brendan Donovan at the top, man, do I have a really good-looking bottom to top of the order with guys potentially getting on base.
Yeah, I like Donovan probably best as the leadoff guy. I'm intrigued by the idea of Nootbaar just because he gets on base at a high clip. He does have home run power. I think 20 home runs is what he can get you from that spot. Him and Donovan are close to, but I would more like Donovan at the top just because I think then Nootbaar sandwiches in better in that 3 spot between, I'm assuming, what would be Contreras and Arenado. The Scott one's the one that intrigues me the most as we get into the season because I agree, early on I don't think you do it. But if he plays well, and right now I think he's going to be the guy that starts in center field for them on opening day, and I find it telling that he's starting in center today and Siani's in a corner. I think if he plays well through the first month, I so want to see him move up to that leadoff spot because BK's right. When you look at his numbers in the minors, he can get on base, he can hit for average, and maybe the most important part is he can put pressure on the guy on the mound when he gets on base. Because if he can get on, it's the same conversation we had a year ago, which was, man, this guy could be like Billy Hamilton, to where if he's getting on base, we've seen the speed, he could be a 40 stolen base guy for the Cardinals and be doing that at the leadoff spot, basically turning in walks or singles into extra base hits by getting that extra base. So I will be keeping an eye on him as the season goes along. But for me, when the season starts, to me, it should be Brendan Donovan in that leadoff spot. I agree with BK. Wynn is more of a 7 through 9 hitter.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. We did get this from the 636. Guys, you got to have more attention to detail. Wynn was far above average until about the final month of the season where he did nothing. I said, does that last month not count? He said, it does, but you could at least mention that he was solid at leadoff for the vast majority of the season.
Do some research.
He was solid. He was. He hit for average, 265 average up until the final month of the regular season. I'm just looking at Mason Wynn in the leadoff spot. He still got on base at a 305 clip. That's not good enough at the top of your order, man. When you have an option, and now for some teams it might be. If you were the White Sox, that may just be your best option. If you were the Washington Nationals the last couple of years where you're tanking, you don't care what the season looks like, that might be your best option.
The Royals last year?
To continue to instill, yeah, for sure. It would be 35% above or 35 points above what the Royals were able to get. But if you're one of these tanking teams and you don't care if you win or not, and you think Mason Wynn projects long-term to be your leadoff guy, sure, instill some confidence in him and let him go out there and get those opportunities every day. I got no problem with that. If this team is truly trying to win in 2025, the way that the Blues were for 2024, and this led to Zach Bolduc being in and out of the lineup early on, then you should approach this with your best lineup construction possible, at least for the first month. If you get out of that first month and you realize very quickly, like many of you believe that they will, hey, our team stinks and we're not going to contend, then go ahead and throw Mason Wynn back at the top of the order and start playing it for 2026 earlier than expected. But for right now, he's not the best guy at the top of your order. The best guy at the top of your order is one of Newt or Donovan. Or Victor Scott if you want to go that route. I just think you wait a little while to get there as well. For me, I would go Lars Nootbaar at the top. Because if you put him batting third, batting second, the biggest frustration that Cardinals fans have with him is his lack of batting average. Because he doesn't put the ball in play very often. He strikes out a little more than what you would probably want, and he takes his walks. He's super patient at the plate. That is a guy that profiles best at the top of your order because you don't want him being up there to drive in runs. It changes the way that he approaches the things. Donovan is a much higher average. This is something that me and T-Bone disagree on. That's totally fine. You can have disagreements on where guys land. Brendan Donovan hits like 270, 280 most years. It's a pretty good batting average in the modern game. He also gets on base, and he has a little bit of pop. I want that guy batting like fifth for me. I could have him batting second or third if I really needed to, but I don't think they need him to because Contreras can bat third. I think Brendan Donovan probably slots in as that number 5-hole hitter for this team most likely. I feel pretty good about that. Lars Nootbaar batting fifth is not a good situation to be in because he doesn't have the same contact rates to drive those runs in. And batting average doesn't matter overall. It does matter when you've got a guy at second that you want to drive in. That walk is not as valuable. It helps, sure, you want more guys on, but the best thing you can do there is drive the run in, not just get on base. And that is more likely when you have Brendan Donovan at the plate than it is with Lars Nootbaar. Hell, it's more likely with Mason Wynn at the plate than it is with Lars Nootbaar. Wynn even profiles better in the middle of the order, 5th, 6th, 7th, than a guy like Lars Nootbaar does.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you there. I mean, I complain about runners in scoring position an awful lot. And, like, looking at Lars Nootbaar's splits last year with runners in scoring position, not good compared to what Brendan Donovan. Brendan Donovan had a 768 OPS, and he had a 356 on base percentage with runners in scoring possession.
What was Lars Nootbaar out of curiosity?
Lars Nootbaar was 227 batting average, 349 on base percentage.
Yeah, so he gets on base.
Yeah.
That's a great on-base percentage. It's
basically
a terrible batting average.
Basically the same slug for those two guys. Donovan was at 398 or 412, and Lars Nootbaar was 398.
So you said it was 229 batting average for Newt, and what was the batting average for Donovan?
279.
Yeah, it's a 50-point difference in batting average when those guys are up with runners in scoring position. That matters over the long run, and that's a small sample size. I get about them, but that matters. And so if I'm going to have one of those guys coming up with opportunities with runners on more often, basically it comes down to this. Who would you rather be on base and who would you rather be up at the plate whenever you've got those opportunities? I would rather it be Nootbaar at second with Donovan at the plate than reversed with Donovan at second and Nootbaar at the plate. I feel more likely I'm going to drive in that run when Donovan is the guy that is at the plate trying to drive him in.
Now, 2 years ago, Lars Nootbaar hit 294 with an 838 OPS with runners in scoring position. So which Lars Nootbaar am I getting, I guess, is the question I'm asking you. Because that Lars Nootbaar is pretty sexy in the 5-hole.
Yeah, what was Lars Nootbaar's batting average for the year, though? Like, Lars is just a guy that's not going to have a high batting average. And that's okay. You can be a really good player in that regard. Like, people love Kyle Schwarber. Until you watch Kyle Schwarber day to day and you realize, oh, that guy, he strikes out a ton. He gets on base at a really high clip because he takes a ton of walks. And this is why most of his teams have decided that guy's a leadoff hitter because he gets on base at a high clip. That's the most valuable thing you can do as a leadoff hitter. And right now, you're actually accentuating the worst part of Mason Wynn's game, which is his lack of on-base skill, by putting him at the top of your order. And you're also getting the worst part of Lars Nootbaar game by putting him in the middle of your order. You're putting them both in positions to fail instead of setting them up for success if you go about it this way. So I hope they switch it up. What do you guys think they do on opening day?
Mason Wynn.
I actually don't think it will be.
Really?
He's been bad in spring training, and I know, like, BKL, I just saw the look on his face of I can't believe he just brought that up. He's going through a slump in spring, and I think it's what's really opening the Cardinals' eyes to, okay, we have other options that can try this. I think if I had to guess today, I think it will be Donovan that will lead off come opening day.
I hope that's the case. I
don't know where Wynn's hitting in that case. It's probably in the 8 spot would be my guess.
I don't really care for any of those three. Don't do Victor Scott.
Yeah, I think Victor Scott starts as your 9-hole hitter.
I just don't want to comfortable. I don't want to put him in that spot right away. Yeah, that's dangerous.
I do think I think there is a much higher likelihood that Victor Scott is your long-term leadoff hitter than Mason Wynn.
Oh, I agree with that. I agree with that.
I think it's much more likely that if you're looking at who is the long-term answer up there, it's more likely it's Victor Scott than Mason Wynn. But for right now, I think the best answer is one of Nootbaar or Donovan. I would personally go Nootbaar, but we'll see what they decide to do. Coming up next, NFL Quick Hitters here on BK and Ferrario.
Tanner Hendrickson here, the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues off again today. They'll be back in action tomorrow night when they visit the Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll bring in coverage starting at 5 o'clock with Alex Ferrario. Puck drop at 6 o'clock with the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. And good news for the Blues last night as the Vancouver Canucks lost at home to the Montreal Canadiens in regulation 4-2. Cardinals will be back in spring training action here in just about 20 minutes as they'll be taking on the New York Mets today. Miles Michaelis will be getting the start for St. Louis. And tonight here on 101 ESPN, another ticket will be punched to March Madness as the Patriot League championship game between Navy and American University will be here on 101 ESPN. We'll have tip-off at 6 o'clock. The Sports Update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. CasinoLondoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Guys, big news in the NFL last night as Joey Bosa has officially decided where he's going to be playing in 2025. He was down to 3 teams. The San Francisco 49ers, who his brother plays for.
Makes sense.
The Miami Dolphins, who his father played for.
Makes sense.
Oh.
That's what we thought the 2 teams were.
Why is there a third one?
And he signed with the Buffalo Bills, who nobody that he knows plays for, but is actually a good football team in 2025. And I think it's a great signing. I think it's a great move by them. I think it's a really good signing by him. It's a 1-year deal, $12.5 million. It's $12 million guaranteed. It's got the upside to get to about $15 million. Donnie texted me in a panic the other day, Alex, because they had signed a number 3 wide receiver in Josh Palmer that he didn't care about and said, what are they doing?
Calm down, Donnie. It's okay, buddy.
And I said, Donnie, it's fine. It's the reality of what the market is this year. There's no good receivers out there. He's fine. He's going to help you guys.
And then Donnie was like, stop texting me, BK.
Why haven't they done anything? I said, relax, man. We'll give it some time. Joey Bosa is a great signing by the Bills. They have a problem in the playoffs of not being able to get to the quarterback, specifically the Kansas City Chiefs quarterback. Bosa helps them do that if he's healthy. What did you guys think of this?
I loved it. And I also love that stayed in the AFC too, just to, stick it to the Chargers. But this is a perfect signing. When they got rid of Von Miller, the Bills, I'm like, okay, they're going to go get something to help their defense, but who's it going to be? And I love the fact that now you're taking a risk because Bosa can't stay healthy, and you need to hope he can stay healthy specifically at the best time of the year for them.
Definitely.
But if he does, yeah, that changes the outlook for this Bills team. It makes your defense that much more of a threat. So I love the signing by Buffalo. It's the perfect way to kind of take that step closer to being better than what you were last year.
T-Bone, what's the likelihood that he is healthy and available for them, though? Because that's been the problem. 5, 9, and 14 games last year. That's what he's played over the last 3 seasons. He has a total in those 3 seasons of 14 sacks.
Oh.
He was a Pro Bowler last year, though. Not that that means anything nowadays.
That's true. I think it's probably 50-60% chance he's healthy at the right time. Worth it on a 1-year deal, though.
Totally agree.
Right? Like, I don't know who it is that ever first said this saying, but there's no such thing as a bad 1-year deal. And really, when it's a guy that has the upside of Joey Bosa. So I think this kind of deal makes all the sense in the world for the Bills because you're right. Like, when you think about how do you beat the Kansas City Chiefs, let me tell you what the answer is not. It's not dropping back in coverage to beat Mahomes. He'll just dink and doink his way all the way down the field. What you got to do is you got to get in his face. And that's been what the success has been for teams that have beaten the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. It's also been the reason that the Raiders, for some reason, are always competitive with them is because Max Crosby's breathing down his neck the whole time. Great signing by the Buffalo Bills, and now it is just as the classic, man. I hope he's healthy at the right time because if he is, he'll be a difference maker to help them try and get over the top this year.
All right, next thing up here, we got to talk Aaron Rodgers. His situation is a little muddy once again. Who could have seen this one coming?
What?
According to a guy that covers the Steelers up in Pittsburgh, he said Aaron Rodgers is, quote, holding the entire Steelers organization hostage, end quote.
That's a good start to a relationship.
So that's good. Then somebody in New York says the Aaron Rodgers situation does not appear to be a money thing from the Giants' perspective. They are just waiting for his decision. A resolution is expected today. Last one here. This comes from Peter Schrager, who said on NFL Network today the Steelers are, quote, giving Rodgers some space, end quote, adding that it could be up to 4 weeks until Aaron Rodgers makes a decision.
Nope.
What?
Nope.
Why do people think that Aaron Rodgers is going to change?
And you're going to waste your entire offseason for a guy that's going to commit to you and not be any good.
Listen, if you're the Steelers, hang up the phone and don't call back. Just leave him on red receipts. Just leave him on red.
You dirty dog.
There's no reason to call back. The "you up" texts, they're not going to result in anything positive.
Well, he ain't going to answer. He's in the darkness retreat.
You can't see the phone when you're darknessing.
This feels like one of those situations where, like, going in to the relationship that you're both wrong for each other. This is going to get messy. It's not going to work. Everybody's going to leave more unhappy than the way that they came, and you're already pretty unhappy. And then you have a kid together. And you're like, this is going to fix the situation. You're the one thing that could save this is us having a kid together and getting together as long as possible. Us being tied together. Steelers, say your goodbyes and say, you know what? We got to do something different. Go try to find a young quarterback in this league.
Call the Colts.
Call the Colts and get Anthony Richardson.
Call the Colts and say...
Call the Patriots and say, we're going to try this Joe Milton thing. I don't know if it's going to work. I would bet against it. But the dude throws it 1,000,000 miles an hour. He can throw it from his knees 60 yards in the air. And we've got DK Metcalf on one side and George Pickens on the other side. Alex talks about the YOLO offense. You want to see the best version of the YOLO offense you've ever seen? Put Joe Milton at quarterback with those two receivers screaming down the sidelines, and let's see what happens.
Or just, you know what?
And if it fails, you get a top 5 pick. And if it works, you've got a quarterback. That's where the Steelers are right now. Aaron Rodgers is the worst thing that they could go out there and do. And you're already experiencing what it is like with Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback. This is not going to change. This is who he is. He will hold your organization hostage. You want to know who you're going to sign? Go look at the roster that he was with in 2016 with the Green Bay Packers. Those are the guys that he's going to sign for you. Allen Lazard, welcome to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like this is what it is with him, man. So I find this all to be infuriating. I don't think he makes any sense whatsoever for them. Him and the Giants are perfect for one another. They're both desperate. He's desperate for a job. The Giants are desperate to keep their jobs right now. Brian Daboll can't possibly go a year without having a mediocre quarterback, apparently, and their GM is just grasping at straws, just flailing in all directions, as we saw last year on Hard Knocks, trying to find a way to make this thing work. All right. Alex, what did you think about the update on Aaron Rodgers?
Well, you said it best, man. Like, just stop. Stop, Steelers. You're not this desperate, right? You always had that buddy that, like, when you hung out with him, like, dude, you're not that desperate. I promise you, you're not. You'll find somebody. Steelers, don't waste your time. It's toxic. You've got Anthony Richardson you could call for. Go back to Russell Wilson. Hell, go call Joe Flacco and ask for one more year from the 45 years. Did he? No, I thought he was still available.
Has he? I don't think
Go
he
get
has.
Joe Flacco for 1 year, man. He'll make you 8 and 9 or something like that. Just go out there and find something that's not going to add toxicity to your roster.
This is what I saw. He's an option for the Giants if they miss out on both Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson.
Go beat the Giants to the punch, man. Leave Rodgers for the New York toxicity team. Go get somebody else.
Look, man, speaking from the desperate club, I can tell you the Steelers are desperate. They make all the sense in the world for Aaron Rodgers, and it's just because they are that desperate for a quarterback. And look, I agree with what you guys are saying, and BK, I'm glad you got that off your chest. I
just want better for the Steelers, honestly. They're a better organization. I do, genuinely.
I don't think they are.
I think the Steelers are a well-run organization. And I think they are stuck. As a Chiefs fan, prior to the Mahomes era, dude, I see so much of what the Chiefs were in the Steelers. They were stuck. They had Alex Smith. They had Matt Castle. Like, they had all these quarterbacks that were retread options. And you just keep going out there and recycling. And you're on this treadmill of mediocrity. And for the Steelers, it's lasted a decade now. It's going to last a decade more if you don't learn the lessons. It's not going to change. Whether it's Russell Wilson or they kind of tried it at least a little bit when they went out there and drafted Kenny Pickett, but it was a class with no quarterbacks and they drafted the guy. At least they tried. I'll give them credit there. But otherwise, it's just been the Mason Rudolph show. And now you're going Aaron Rodgers? This is not the way, guys. It's really not.
Guys,
This is where we must have a disagreement. And maybe it's just the Cardinals that have made me pessimistic in baseball through this. If you are stuck in the middle as an organization and continue to be there, you are not a well-run organization. right? If you are stuck in the middle, you are truly in the worst possible. So it is better to go through a rebuild.
Else right. They're doing everything else right.
Because they're stuck in the middle.
Yeah, but quarterbacks are hard to find. And you want a winning team, quarterbacks are hard to find.
They've been searching, as BK just said, for a decade now, right?
No, they've really only been searching for 5 years. They've been on this treadmill of mediocrity for 10 because Ben was bad at the end.
And they stuck with the guy that was a legend in Pittsburgh. So, I mean, I get that.
You had to stick with him there. That's like the last couple of years with Waino and Yachty. You at least understand it. Really, they've been stuck on the cycle since Ben retired. That's really where they have been.
Like you still stayed around 500 throughout that time, which any team is going to want, and you make the aggressive moves to make your roster better.
And I kind of respect that. In a weird way, I understand the aspiration of trying to continue winning. You have TJ Watt. You've got good players on your roster. This is not a bad football team. You just don't have a quarterback. And so I understand not wanting to, A, mortgage the future to go out and get a quarterback, and B, not wanting to take this massive step back where you have a painful season. I get that. But at some point, you've got to admit the reality of where you're at as an organization. So, T-Bone, I guess this is where you're getting is if you're unwilling to do that, that makes you a bad organization. I just think it makes them aspiring for the wrong things. And if you are going out there and your answer to your quarterback position is Aaron Rodgers, you are a team that is aspiring for all of the wrong things at this point.
And for me, that's a bad run organization.
Fair enough.
Right? Like you said, mortgage in the future for a quarterback. Well, if you do that, now maybe you get it wrong and then you end up just going into the rebuild, but at least you picked a path. What are they saving for right now? Right? Like if they're bringing in Aaron Rodgers and this is their answer, what the hell are they saving for? Pick a path. I mean, I agree. We had the conversation when Sonny Gray made the comment in winter warm-up of, hey, I feel like the Cardinals have finally picked their path. You either tear this down to the studs and you try and rebuild.
You don't have to do that.
Yeah, I think you do. You cannot stay in the middle without a quarterback.
In the NFL, the worst thing you can do is tear it down to the studs. That doesn't work in the NFL the way that it does in baseball, the way that it can in basketball. Like other sports, you can do that. You can't do that in the NFL, man. You've got to get the quarterback, yes, but tearing it down to the studs, more often than not, it fails spectacularly. So I don't mind them trying to build it this way because you've got to have the offensive line in place. You've got to have the weapons out there. Otherwise, your quarterback ends up getting killed and you're a terrible football team around him and you ruin the guy. So they've got to find a quarterback. This is not the way to do it. Instead of going out and getting a 40-year-old, hey, can you at least get somebody that's 25? Go get Anthony Richardson. Go get Joe Milton. At least that gives you a chance for something with any kind of a ceiling. This has no chance for a ceiling whatsoever. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Questions and answers coming up next. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. If you guys have any questions, get them in right now on the Air Comfort Service text line. From the 636, guys, why don't the Steelers do what the 49ers did to get Trey Lance and trade whatever it takes to get the top overall pick? Let me see what that would take for them. Because they're drafting 21st or something like that right now.
It's got to be like the next 5 first-round picks. And honestly, do you even need to get to the first overall? Can you go
2,
top
3?
Yeah, 3 and get Shador?
If you think he's worth it. I mean, if you think he's a legitimate franchise-level quarterback, you can
If I'm the Steelers and I've got Mike Tomlin,
certain.
I'd take a shot on that before I would go all the way up.
See, I don't think this is the year I would do it. And this is one of those to where I think it's telling when teams are willing to make that kind of move, especially if they are quarterback starved like Tennessee is.
Yeah.
I don't remember who they traded that pick for when they went and got Lance, so I don't remember if that team needed a quarterback or not. But
oh God, they don't even have their second-round pick this year.
The reason I bring that up is because, if I'm making that move right now for the Steelers, it's because the teams that need a quarterback don't believe in them. So, yeah, they're willing to take the massive haul that you're going to give them. If this quarterback class was good like last year's, there's no chance in hell you get to move up into that spot to select a quarterback.
All right, so if you put their first, third, fourth, and fifth round picks together, it would get them up to number 13 overall.
All right, and then next year's first?
If you put in next year's first, you typically value that as you value it as like a mid-second round pick. So that would put them up to about the 6th or 7th overall selection. So 2 firsts, 3rd, 4th, 5th. So basically their entire draft this year plus their first round pick next year. You could potentially get up to like the Vegas Raiders pick. Maybe Jacksonville would trade down for you because they need a lot. They're the 5th overall selection. So you could move up with Jacksonville, probably get ahead of Vegas. That allows you to get to Shador. Again, you're giving up your first round pick next year, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Are you doing that?
No. I'd draft a quarterback in the later round and see if I get lucky and then just try again next year.
They might trade George Pickens. That might get them another 3rd round pick, let's call it. Then you've got a little bit more ammo to work with. If they do that, I would probably do what we just mentioned. First round pick next year, you still have a 3rd, but you're giving up your other 3rd round pick, 4th and 5th. So you would end up selecting, it's called number 5 overall, once in the 3rd round, and then a couple of 7th round picks. It's not a lot. You're mortgaging almost your entire draft to be able to get him. But if you think he's legitimately a franchise quarterback, it's worth it.
I wouldn't do it because I don't think these are franchise quarterbacks that are in this draft and Shador and Cam Ward. But, as I said in the last segment, I guess I wouldn't crush them. I would say, hey, at least you picked a direction. I think that direction is going to end up ultimately sending you into a rebuild. But I'm glad that you chose a path. I think I could convince myself of it. I wouldn't personally do it.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 314. We'll get to a couple more questions here. You guys talk about pairs instead of lines for the Blues. Who would you say are the current pairs, especially on the 3rd and 4th line?
On the 3rd line?
So as of today, if we just go down the lines together, Thomas Booch on the top line?
Yeah.
Shin and Kyrou or Shin and Holloway?
I would actually say Holloway and Kyrou.
Can you do that without
I think
having
so.
the center be the rotating guy?
I think when you have 2 wingers that drive play, I think you can do that and put another centerman in there.
Okay. 3rd line right now, I don't know that you have a pairing. I think it's just 3rd line is Bolduc.
Yeah.
And you're hoping to find...
If I were to pick one, it would be Sundqvist and Bolduc, and then you just... Texier's played in Joseph's spot.
Sure.
It would probably be Sundqvist and Bolduc, but I think you're right. It's just Bolduc.
And 4th line is Radek Faksa and Toropchenko.
Yeah. I don't even know if 4th line I would ever look at as a pairing.
I think
would say
that's
3
the
guys
only
that
trio.
I just trust to throw out there.
Because when you pluck one guy out of that, I think it disrupts what they have when they're together.
All right, last thing here from the 314. Guys, do you think that BK made a business decision by not jumping on the Blues playoff train? Some are asking.
Well, no, he tells us that it doesn't matter unless he truly believes it.
Correct.
So I think he actually believes that they're not going to make it, which is great for us Blues fans.
You guys can think I'm an idiot. That's totally fair. I believe what I say.
I am going to
I believe you're an idiot.
I'm going to have some type of burning ceremony for that hat before they return to action on Thursday.
With Alex and T-Bone on VK. Coming up next, is this the offseason to lock in Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg to long-term deals? And where does Jimmy Snuggerud fit into this lineup whenever he is ready to make it up to the NHL level? We'll talk about it next here on 101 ESPN.
In my opinion, this offseason, both players will be extended to 8-year deals. Are you going to do the same thing as the Oilers? You're going to let these guys go into their last year of their contract and then be restricted free agents and somebody comes and grabs them? I think both sign 8-year deals. Army has seen enough. These guys are only going to get better. Dylan Holloway is a hockey nut. He's stick handling all the time. He's shooting pucks off the ice, on the ice, working out. He loves the sport of hockey. And we've seen his development from what he was last year in Edmonton to what he is this year. What's he going to be in 3-4 years? How about Philip Broberg? He's 22, maybe 23 at this point. What's he going to be at 27, 28 when he's in his prime?
He's 23 years old right now, is Philip Broberg, and he's a hell of a hockey player. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Alex, I thought that was an interesting thought yesterday from Jamie Rivers on the Fast Lane. They're talking about what the Blues decide to do with Holloway and Broberg. Both will be eligible for extensions, I believe on July 1st, if I'm not mistaken, this offseason. Holloway this year has 20 goals, 47 points. He's a plus 11 on the ice in 65 games played for the Blues. Broberg got off to that torrid pace early on when it came to the points, has slowed down in that regard, but is still at 21 points in 52 games. Again, a plus 10 on the ice, playing more than 20 minutes a night in his first real season as an opportunity to be a top 4 defenseman for the Blues. I'm totally in favor of the Blues signing these guys long-term in the offseason. If that's an 8-year deal, great. More power to them. Lock them in long-term while you still can. Get the prime of their careers. That means you have them locked in until their age 31, I believe, seasons for the two of them. I'm all for it. I will say this. I don't think the Blues are at risk of losing them the way that Edmonton did.
No.
Their cap situation it does not resemble what was taking place in Edmonton, and the Blues were just really smart with the way they played it. They waited until after July 1st, knowing Edmonton was in a cap situation and a contending stance, that they were going to go for it this year, and they put their young players on the back burner, and the Blues said, we'll wait for the young players. You guys go get those mediocre free agents, and then we'll take advantage at that point in time. Army doesn't allow himself to be at risk that way. He gets these things done early. It's why you're seeing some of the players right now getting off-season deals in mid-March. The Blues don't allow that stuff to be played in the offseason. They don't want these guys to hit free agency. So I think it's a smart thing to do. I do not think the risk is there that they're going to lose them via offer sheet, so that wouldn't be the primary reason I do it. I just think they're good young players, and the earlier you can lock those guys up, the cheaper deal it typically is for the team.
Now, to be fair, they could lose them in a couple of years to offer sheets if the Blues weren't willing to give them $20 million each AAV, because that would put them above the cap, and it would be tough to get those guys re-signed. So on one hand, yes, that was sarcasm. No, I don't think it's a good idea. I think you have to do it now, because what will happen after this year is the cap is going to continue to rise. And the more the cap goes up, the more pending free agents are going to want bigger contracts. Yeah. And not saying it would be an overpay, but what you don't want to do is one good year and then it goes, now let's just see what happens with this. And then the following year they take another step, and then we're talking somewhere where you could have gotten them at $7.5 or $8 million. Now it's at like $9.5, $10 million, specifically defensemen, because defensemen get paid their money, especially if you're a top pair guy. So yeah, I would absolutely. And frankly, I have to assume the conversations have already started. Jamie's right. Armstrong knows that these guys are good. He sees it on the ice. So there's no real hesitation with this. It's just you have to wait until the availability is there. This is why you did the offer sheet to them, though, right? You were solidifying what the core was going to look like. It's why Jake Neighbors got his contract extension at the beginning of this year. They wanted to get all of the work out of the way so that they could focus on the bigger task at hand, and that's improving the roster. You lock everybody up. Nobody else needs to get signed this offseason with the exception of Joel Hofer. And then next year, you've got a ton of defensemen that are coming off of the books. That opens up a lot of money.
Yeah, you've got Fowler and Letty both coming off of the books, and at that point, you'll only have one more year left of Falk and Crew.
Yeah, so and you'll be in a position to where you can add on to what's already the core. So, yeah, I mean, my expectation is that these guys are probably going to get a contract extension. Now, I don't know if you're them. Do I want to sign an 8-year deal, or do I want to go 3 or 4 year deal and see what this looks like?
That's what I was going to say.
If I'm them, I'm doing that, which, hey, if you're the Blues, more power to you. If you continue to be great, we'll pay you. But if you struggle, well, then you're not going to get as much money.
I do wonder if the injury scare for Philip Broberg changes that. If you're Broberg and you looked at it and you saw, man, there was a chance I was going to miss out on potentially a lot of money based on what happened with his knee there. I don't know, but sometimes when you have an injury scare like that, where you think it might be pretty severe, you want to lock in that money as soon as you can. So because it's guaranteed in the NHL. This isn't like the NFL where all these contracts that we're seeing, roughly half of the money is actually going to be going to the player after they sign it. The NHL, if this offseason, Philip Broberg signed an 8-year deal worth $8 million per year. He's getting every penny of that. All $64 million is guaranteed to him, whether he plays all of those games or plays zero of those games. So I could see it maybe for him. What do you think that looks like? Because that to me is maybe the more interesting. Because T-Bone, I'm sure you're on the same page as us, right? Lock him in as long as they want to do it. We'll go ahead and get him in.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm Broberg, I'm looking at north of $8.5 million. Man. Because I'm especially now that he's going to be playing like a number one defenseman with Parayko's injury. By the end of this season, I'm already going to have, I think he's going to be over 100 games in the NHL. He has played in the Stanley Cup final, and he just showcased the ability to be a top pair defenseman. So, yeah, I mean, the going rate for top pair defenseman is $9.5 million. So, yeah, if I'm Broberg, I'm probably looking at that. And honestly, that's a steal. 8 by 8.5 for a Philip Broberg. That is a massive steal for a young player like that who's going to be 31. Guys, Parayko is just now 31, and look at what we're seeing from him. So if you're paying this kid who's already showed you that ability, he's making $8.5 million. By the end of it, with the cap going up, $8.5 million is going to feel like a $5 or $4 million AAV. So the Holloway one's actually the one that I'd be most intrigued by because you're probably talking somewhere 6 and 6.5, but
if you're going 8 years, it's more than that.
Probably,
because
especially with the cap going up.
A 6 or 6.5 year deal is going to look like nothing.
Which is why I wonder if I'm Holloway, and if Holloway's agent, you say, let's do 4 and get you about 5.5 so that we can go back to the table when you're a consistent 30-goal scorer and ask for $9 or $10 million. Because you don't have much leverage in this one, right? Like you've had one really good year and it's been really good, but as forwards, you got to show consistency. Defensemen, you can kind of see the assets that are there. Forwards, you got to show the ability to kind of up the ante. So if they go to Holloway, I could see Holloway looking at this being like, let's just do a shorter term deal, 4 years, $5.5, $6.5 million, and then we'll go back to the table when you're a 30-goal scorer.
That's probably what I would do if I'm him.
Yeah.
I would probably do the shorter term deal because I think that there's real upside there for him to be like a 30-goal scorer, 65 points per year. And with the 200-foot game that he plays, you could be talking about a $9 to $10 million per year given where the cap is headed.
If I'm his agent, I look at Pavel Buchnevich and say, well, he was 30 years old and he just got, 5 by 8? So, yeah, we could get that, especially if you go back to the table when you're 26 years old. The prime's not even there yet. So, yeah, that's probably what I'd be looking at if I'm them.
So, if you're just looking contracts similarities for Philip Broberg, the one that kind of jumps out to me, and I'm curious if you think he'll be worth more, less, or the same as this guy. Mikhail Sergachev had a lot more time in the NHL when he signed his deal with Tampa last year. But at that point in time, he signed an 8-year deal worth 8.5, if I'm not mistaken, per year. Sergachev was a guy that consistently, 40-ish points in the NHL.
And he won multiple Stanley Cups by the time he signed that contract.
Yeah, but he's a legit top 4 defenseman. Ended up getting traded, of course, this offseason to Utah. Is that the kind of deal you think that he's probably going to be saying, okay, I'm going to get the Sergachev deal 8 by 8.5?
Probably. And if I'm his agent, I look at it and I say, I see Seth Jones got $9.5 million. Evan Bouchard's probably going to get close to that. And you're not either of those players because Seth Jones was putting up like almost a point per game in his early portion of a season. Bouchard's doing that right now. But yeah, that's a hell of a deal for Philip Broberg of one full season in the NHL to get $8.5 million. But again, if things continue to progress the way you expect it to with Broberg, it's going to be the same way that people were talking about Parayko's deal when he signed it. $6.5 million, and it was 8 years. People were like, that's an overpay. No, it's not. Not when you got a number one defenseman who's going to get to that point. So I think that's probably the perfect threshold to start at, and then you just build from there.
That's kind of where I'm seeing this as well.
And that's great for this team to get that locked up at that deal.
Are you willing to do that? 8 by 8.5?
Yeah, because
you're not.
You're paying more than that on the market to find a defenseman.
Over there.
I am. It's just a ton of money, man. It is. It's a lot of money to commit to after one season of seeing it. I'm ready to go. I find it amazing, honestly, that there's like zero hesitation for any of us.
I think it's because look at how long you were searching for that guy. You went through a Vince Dunn, a Jake Wallman, a Nico Mikkola. You went through all of these guys to find a legit guy who could be consistent not even in your top pair, just in your top 4. But again, you're going to see top pair potential from Broberg for the rest of the way. You're paying more than that on the open market to sign a defenseman of his ilk, and typically they're already in their 30s because they don't hit the free agency period. And again, if you look at this and you say, yeah, he had a down month and a half from his injury, look at the points he put up prior to the injury and look at the points he's putting up since the Four Nations break. I mean, that's almost I don't know what the projection would be, but I mean, you're talking about potentially like 50 points from Broberg if you stay healthy for how he was pacing out. So, yeah, I don't think that's an overpay, especially with where the cap's going.
And for me, like, I don't worry about that knee injury that he had. So that's not a problem for me. I look at defensemen, and I say defensemen typically take longer to develop, and they age a lot more gracefully than like forwards do. And I mean, I agree with what Alex said. I mean, you just look at what Broberg's done this season, and if I'm saying that I expect defensemen to age better to get better as they age, I think that there's still a little bit more ceiling to dream on for Philip Broberg, and that's why I would be all in on locking him up. And he also profiles well, right? Guy that can skate well. It moves the puck well, also has length to help break up plays. Like, that's typically the stuff that doesn't go away, and especially for a guy of his age.
I have zero reservations with either of these players. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not giving them crazy money. I'm not talking 10, 11, 12 million dollars right now. If that's what they're looking for on the long-term deal, because the cap is going up so much that there will come a point in time, like $10 million deal today, if they did 8 by 10. In 7 years, it would probably be the equivalent of like a $6.5 million salary
deal,
today.
Then.
Yeah. So I can understand why, if you're their agent, you're saying, if you're going to get a 10-year or 8-year deal out of us, it's going to be a crazy salary. And the fewer years that you get, the cheaper the deal is, which sounds counterproductive, but it's kind of the way that this thing ends up working, because the team is actually getting the one it's more of a team-friendly deal when they're this young, that long of a term, because you're buying out essentially free agency years where they could go to the market at 27, 28 years old and get paid at a huge, huge level on the market. I do wonder if that ends up bringing it down to like a 4-year deal for both of them. That's where I could see them settling. But if I'm Army, as many years as you could possibly stack onto that thing is the best case scenario, because I have no reservations about these two players, which is crazy, dude. We've seen 60 games out of them, and we're feeling great about it. No reservations whatsoever.
Well, and especially watch this free agency period when Evan Bouchard gets paid by Edmonton. It's going to give you a real good idea of what that type of defenseman is going to get paid on the open market.
And that's why you want to get these things done as quickly as possible. The longer you wait, I've seen some people say wait until after next year. The longer you wait with this spike in the cap, the more expensive it's going to get to do the business with these two players. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. You guys give us 2 scenarios. We'll tell you which one's more likely here on BK and Ferrario. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for more likely to happen. You guys give us two scenarios. We'll tell you which one is more likely. Let's start out with this, Alex. More likely to win their respective conference tournament. Let's go most likely, Alex, out of these three.
Ooh.
Mizzou, SLU, or Illinois? Which of those three is most likely to win their conference tournament?
Not Mizzou. Sorry, MIZ, but
Jesus, man.
SEC is going to be a gauntlet. You don't even believe it. Oh,
Just didn't like the dismissive nature
Well, I mean,
with which
we
you...
all...
he's not wrong.
Yeah, we all knew it.
That was the old Randy. BK, no.
Also, he wasn't wrong.
That's fair.
Man, I think I'm going to say Illinois. And there's no disrespect against SLU, but I think when it comes down to it, Illinois just has the game-breaking players, and I think you could run the table in the Big Ten tournament. I'm not sure SLU can. They've played well down the stretch, but I've also seen them lose in a couple of those A-10 games. So I'll side with Illinois.
I think I'd say Illinois as well. I don't think SLU's got the ceiling to win the A-10. And I know that's probably not popular, but
I know.
And the SEC is way too tough. And Mizzou's not playing well going into that tournament. I think it is Illinois. I think Illinois is the team that has the best chance to win their conference tournament. Now, if they win, and we don't know their matchup yet, they play Thursday. If they win in that game, they will get Maryland, which is Brad Underwood's kryptonite. But I think they are the one with the best ceiling and the best path to go do so.
I think SLU will win their first game. They'll play one of Davidson or Richmond in that one, but then they have to take on Loyola of Chicago. That's not going to be an easy one. Even if they did move on, they would then have to go up against VCU, who they played well against earlier this year. It's asking a lot for a team that has not had that kind of quality at a consistent level. I think it's asking a lot for them to go on a run of having an entire week of quality basketball. It's Illinois. It's super annoying that it's Illinois, but the answer is Illinois.
It's cute that you tried to defend Mizzou, that they can stay competitive.
They just have to shoot at least 28% from behind the three-point arc. If they can do that consistently,
It's a low number.
they've got a chance.
1, 2, 3, just don't suck.
Yeah, literally. That is the bar to clear, and they've struggled to do it this year, but that's what they need to do. All right, Alex, what do you got for us?
Guys, more likely to happen, Jimmy Snuggerud or Dalibor Dvorsky finish top 3 Calder Trophy next year?
Snuggerud, because Dvorsky's not going to put up the points necessary. Dvorsky, I think, will be potentially a better overall player than Snuggerud early on, but Snuggerud has a chance to score 25 goals next year. I wouldn't bet on it, but he could. And if you do that, you're going to get a chance. You're going to put up the numbers. It's like the Norris Trophy conversation every year.
Yeah.
Is it always the best defenseman? No, but it's the guy that puts up the most points. Mm-hmm. So if you're a rookie, you're putting up a ton of goal production. That's something that immediately stands out nationally. For guys that aren't watching every one of these Blues games, let's be honest.
What? I agree. I think I would go Snuggerud because of what BK said. He's going to have, will there be more points? He's definitely going to have better goal production, I think. And I think that will help him. And I don't think Dvorsky will be on a power play unit. I could be wrong, but Snuggerud will be. I mean, Snugs could probably be.
I think both will be.
Snugs will slot in probably on your number 1 unit next year and be that one-time shot that they've been looking for. And if he does have a good year, he probably is scoring like maybe 20, 25 goals, and a decent chunk are going to come from the power play.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Alex.
No, you're fine. I was going to say mine would be Snuggerud as well. I think Dvorsky's going to surprise some people. He's going to put up numbers, especially when you look at the past like runner-ups and how many centermen are there. But Dvorsky might be playing third-line minutes. Snuggerud might be playing top 6, and that's going to be the difference.
Guys more likely to get the most at-bats in the leadoff spot this season.
There we go.
Lars Nootbaar or Mason Wynn?
Mason Wynn, because the Cardinals like Mason Wynn, and they're going to keep him there.
That's probably what I would go with as well. I don't think it's the right call. I think a lot of this stuff is thinking with your head versus your heart situation. My heart says we should go with Lars Nootbaar here. I think that's the right choice.
What's your body telling you?
My body's telling me.
Yes.
I do think that the Cardinals will lean with what they've done, which is Mason Wynn at the leadoff spot. It's why I think Steven Matz is going to be a part of the rotation on opening day. It's why I think that Mason Wynn is going to be their starting shortstop on opening day. And it's why I was, up until this week, leaning towards Michael Ciani breaking camp as your starting center fielder. I think that is the one that could change based on what we've seen thus far in camp. But I'll stick with Mason Wynn as your leadoff hitter.
See, I think it's going to end up being that where we see Nootbaar potentially get more at-bats because
Stop thinking with your heart, T-Bone.
I hope you're right.
I'm thinking with my heart, my brain, and apparently our body.
Whoa. Yeah, baby.
I think they're going to abandon the win leadoff thing pretty quickly if he does start at the season there, because he's just not a leadoff guy. And you mentioned when we talked about this earlier in the show, BK, of like, hey, if you're a rebuilding team and you thought, hey, that guy is the long-term answer, even if he doesn't have the on-base now, you still do it. He's not the short-term or long-term answer for the Cardinals at leadoff. They have better options, both long-term and short-term, in Nootbaar, in Donovan, and hell, potentially in Victor Scott moving forward in that leadoff spot. So I do not think this year he will finish with the most at-bats. I think he will be like third on the team in at-bats in the leadoff spot or second.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for more likely to happen. You guys give us two scenarios. We'll tell you which one is more likely. More likely to happen, the Blues make it to the playoffs or Mizzou makes it to the Sweet 16. That one comes from the 314. I like that.
Blues make it to the playoffs.
Yeah, say it with me. Blue, I don't know what we would chant.
Yeah, you got to have the chant down before you want to get me engaged. Come on, man.
No, it's my bad.
Come on, man. It's the Blues.
We win blue. You
got to say that a little like slurrier.
We win blue.
There you go. It's the path. Like yes, the destiny is in the Blues' hands and they have to win, but it's only a 1-point difference between them and Calgary. Like, if Calgary stubs their toe at any point over this next couple of weeks and the Blues miss an opportunity to gain, they're still in it. Like, Calgary has to run the table and the Blues have to fall flat for them to be officially out of it. So, and looking at the schedule for the Calgary Flames, it is not a cakewalk. So, unfortunately, it's also not a cakewalk for Mizzou to get to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, I think a lot of this depends on where Mizzou is seated. And what I mean by that is, like, what are you going to have to go up against a 2 seed in that second round? Because that's going to be the case if you're a 7 seed. And if Mizzou loses that first game in the SEC tournament, they're probably a 7 seed. They've got to win at least 1 and maybe 2 games in the SEC tournament to bump up to that 6 line. It really would have helped them a lot if they were able to get to the 5. In that scenario, you avoid playing against this quality of team. But, yeah, I think it's probably the Blues, just because of where Mizzou has put themselves on the seeding line. You're going to go up against a 2 or 3 seed in the second round of the tournament, and that's going to be a tough task. Mizzou's beaten those teams, but they were playing at a much different level when they beat them than what they're playing right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's probably the St. Louis Blues. Missouri's path just got a lot harder. Doesn't feel like Mizzou basketball, though.
Yeah, why are you getting frustrated? The Blues are going to be in the playoffs.
Yeah, where you build up your hopes. I mean, you tell me Mizzou can't have nice things.
It's the most Mizzou thing ever for them to have such an unbelievable season and then to play their worst basketball at the exact wrong time.
Hey, man,
it's the opposite of rooting for the Chiefs. The Chiefs play terrible football for 3 months and then figure out a way to make it all work in January.
Yeah, but the difference is the Chiefs know that they can win. I don't think Mizzou knows that they can win.
They did all year, though. And then the last month, it's been brutal. All right.
We get to broadcast from Enterprise Center in April, guys.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line from the 386. More likely, Cooper Kupp goes to the Cowboys or the Seahawks? I don't think either of them.
I was going to say, because I say neither and say the Patriots.
Cooper Kupp is purely a slot guy, and Jackson Smith and Jigba plays in the slot for the Seahawks, so they make no sense. So I guess if I'm going to go with one of them, I would go with the Cowboys, but I do not think that he ends up with either of those 2 teams.
Yeah, I agree with you. It would be the Cowboys, although the Seahawks would make sense. You got to load up with whatever you can find, even if he is a slot receiver. I would say it's the Cowboys because they're desperate to get somebody else that can catch the football. But
honestly, the Steelers make a lot of sense for
that, or the Patriots.
Yeah. Patriots make a ton of sense as well.
Yeah, I would say most likely take the field of those 2. I would lean Cowboys, but I don't see it happening.
A lot of people mentioning that the Chiefs played terrible football in February. That's right. I mentioned January.
That's right, text line.
Honestly, they played terrible football all year. They just got lucky.
How was the Super Bowl, BK?
How was the Super Bowl, BK? Did you have a lot of fun?
It wasn't good.
At what point did you say this isn't going well? The first 2 minutes or 3 minutes?
It was that pick 6. It was the pick 6, and then they came back and had another drive to potentially double dip right before the half, and they failed spectacularly. Yeah, and Mahomes walked off the field, and you knew he was done.
I lost $75 because at halftime, I'm like, Chiefs are going to come back, and I bet on them.
You did?
Yep.
No.
Yeah, because I was like, the Chiefs are going to come back. I know how this works.
Oh, dude.
And it was great odds. I'm like, I can't pass this up. Threw that one away.
Yeah. Well,
hopefully my wife wasn't listening.
Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. There is a Cardinals player that is once again generating buzz nationally as one of the potential breakout stars of Major League Baseball in 2025. We'll tell you who that is next here on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues off again today. They'll be back in action tomorrow night when they visit the Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 5 o'clock with Alex Ferrario. Then puck drop at 6 o'clock with the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. Blues got good news last night as the Canucks lost to the Montreal Canadiens regulation 4-2. And St. Louis Cardinals in spring training action as they are taking on the New York Mets. Miles Michaelis is on the mound for St. Louis. They are tied 0-0 in the home half of the third. This portion update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See him at Londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. We'll tell you about the comparison that was made for Jordan Walker here in just a moment. You're not going to like the player that he was compared to in Keith Law's piece earlier today. But Keith Law did write about a Cardinal that I think you'll enjoy a little bit more. He wrote about his MLB breakout candidates for 2025. MVP.
Nolan
Herrera.
We are so going to be good this year.
Oh, okay. Well, hold on. We are on different pages.
So he wrote the following about Ivan Herrera. I've always bought the bat, as Herrera has a great swing and makes a ton of contact. But in a small sample size last season, he also showed that he can make plenty of hard contact. His hard hit rate and exit velocities would be right in line with MLB average for catchers had he played enough. He got just under half a season of playing time last year and was worth nearly 2 wins above replacement. I think he'll double that this season, assuming he gets twice the at-bats. He did struggle to control the running game last year, and that could impact how much the Cardinals, who seem very sensitive about catcher defense in the post-Yadier Molina era, to play him defensively. All right.
I'm so going to get mad at this team this season.
Ivan Herrera was the #1 candidate, according to Keith Law. You may love him. You may hate him. You may be somewhere in between. That's totally fair. He is not the first one, and I don't believe will be the last one to mention Ivan Herrera as a breakout candidate this season. I view him that way as well, Alex. You don't hit 300 at the major league level by accident, especially not when you have at least 250 plate appearances, which is exactly what Ivan Herrera did last year. I feel like it was the quietest, great offensive season for a young Cardinals player that I can remember. The dude hit 300 and had an OPS of 800 as a catcher, and most people were down on him because of how terrible the defense was, which tells you just how bad the defense was, totally, but also speaks to just how down people are on the Cardinals. This guy has a chance to be, I'm not going to say a star because I don't think that's necessarily in his range of outcomes. But if you liked Sean Murphy and thought that was a legit game-changing type of a piece behind the plate, that's what Ivan Herrera could be offensively. I don't know that he'll ever get to where Sean Murphy is defensively, but Ivan Herrera could be that on the offensive side of the ball. Alex, where do you stand right now with what Ivan Herrera could be for the Cardinals this year?
I think he could be an all-star. I think he could be a middle-of-the-order bat. I think he could be one of those go-to guys. And I don't think it's that outlandish to say. We've seen the bat play. You've seen the bat for a guy that wasn't getting a lot of playing time because of his defense, and you've seen it work at the major league level. Now you just build off of it. And if I can be bold, I don't care what he does behind the plate defensively. I don't.
He's got to be, I feel like it is the Jordan Kyrou conversation where it's you got to be average. Can you be even a little below average? If you could be that, I can deal with it because of what you bring behind or at the plate whenever you're hitting. If you are terrible defensively, which is what he was last year, you can't be that long term. But the bat plays so well that he can eventually be a DH.
Well, yeah, and you know what? You can get to that point because you've got a ton of catchers in the system that are going to be coming through. Jimmy Crooks, Bernal, they've got plenty of these guys. But for the now, I don't need to hear the argument of, Pedro Paje should be getting starts because he's better defensively. That bat doesn't play. What plays in your lineup is Ivan Herrera, and you know it will. You just need to not be dropping baseballs behind the plate. If you can just be adequate enough back there, I'm fine with it because I don't need you to be a gold glove defender behind the plate. Right now, I just need offense. I just need guys who could step to the plate and come up with big moments. So that's Ivan Herrera for me, and I do agree with Keith Law's point. I think when it comes to breakout candidates, this is a guy who could be put together an all-star-esque season if he's getting playing time. My concern is he's not going to get the playing time.
Sure.
Because as soon as one bad defensive play happens, you're not going to see him for 4 or 5 days.
T-Bone, here are the players over the last 4 years that had better offensive seasons as primary catchers than what Ivan Herrera had last year based on their OPS+. Yasmani Grandal, who might be honestly a comparison for Ivan Herrera, given what their limitations are defensively. Buster Posey, Wilson Contreras, Mitch Garver did this 2 years ago, William Contreras, Adley Rutschman, Mike Zunino, Sean Murphy, Will Smith, Alejandro Kirk, end of list. Those are the best hitting catchers in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, well, that's who I was trying to think of, Alejandro Kirk.
Alejandro Kirk is a really good hitter, had a down season last year offensively, but that guy has made a career out of being average defensively and a really good hitter behind the plate. Where are you at on what the Cardinals have potentially in Ivan Herrera?
I think defensively, I don't know what they're going to have in him, but offensively, I think he can be their answer to that 3 spot, which is where I look at their lineup and say they've got a huge hole there. Like when we were talking about the leadoff spot earlier, and if you go with Nootbaar at leadoff, say, or even Donovan to an extent, we know the Cardinals like their left, right. It's Ollie Marmol's big thing. Okay, so Contreras is the 2. 3 is Nootbaar if you got Donovan there. I don't know who's 3 if Nootbaar's hitting leadoff. Honestly, it might be Donovan, which I don't love. And then Arenado is the 4, and then so on and so forth. To me, that's not a very good number 3 hitter. If your answer is Nootbaar or your answer is Donovan, that is not a good enough number 3 hole hitter. I think Herrera can potentially fill that void. That's what I think his ceiling is potentially this year because he hits for average, he gets on base, and he also is sneakily good power-wise. And especially in spring, he's really hitting for power. Now, it's not home run power yet, and I don't know if he'll get there this year because he only hit 5 home runs last year. But if he becomes a doubles machine in that 3 spot as a right-handed hitter, that will play for the St. Louis Cardinals. So that's what I think they have with his ceiling offensively. Defensively, I kind of agree. I don't think he can be as atrocious as he was last year and have the noodle arm issue that he had going to second. Now, granted, Potheads wasn't very good either, and for some reason that goes under the radar because the Cardinals don't want to mention that. I think you put him behind the plate 2 out of every 3 games. And I understand that it may be bad defensively. And you know what? If it is, by July, we can have a discussion about what we want to do with his defensive position. And it probably would just be DH. But this is the kind of bat that you should not move on from. Look, if he has to become a DH, if that is what is in the cards for him as his position long term, I don't care. I think that is fine. It is time for the Cardinals organization. I've been saying this for a long time. They should start treating the DH as a position, not as a time where you need to get guys a half day off in that spot. So if that means that's where he ends up long term, but he can hit, that guy's valuable to your organization.
And one of the benefits of going young is that you don't need that time off as often. Like, young guys should be able to play more often than the 32-plus-year-old players that you've had at first and third, for example, over the last few seasons. So that becomes less necessary, which allows you then to use that DH spot not as an off day, effectively, but it allows you to use it as a position, adds it as an extra bat. Hey, this is our 9th hitter that is in the lineup every single day, and it's typically the same guy. That could be something that ends up helping them long-term with Ivan Herrera. I'm really high on him. You guys know that. I think he could be one of the best hitters on this roster, and when you look at the comparisons for him, there's just not many guys at this age that have had this kind of success offensively at that position. It just doesn't happen. So I would stick with it, see what you've got there before some of those young catchers that Alex has mentioned end up coming up to the big league level. All right. He wasn't the only Cardinal mentioned in this breakdown by Keith Law.
Oh.
Quote, I'll be waiting for the Jordan Walker breakout when he comes back from his knee injury, but I'm starting to worry that his name rhymes with Ricky Weeks.
Oh, God.
Rhymes with Ricky Weeks.
But it doesn't rhyme with it, though, by the way.
Yeah, he's saying he's worried that Jordan Walker is going to become the next Ricky Weeks, where you're always waiting for the breakout, and it just never comes the way that you were expecting it to. That I think is, T-Bone, something that you've been mentioning lately, where you just don't see a lot of guys that have a breakout in year one, kind of, just above average offensively in year one, and then have the kind of terrible season that he had last year, and then come back from that. The truth is, you don't see a lot of guys have the kind of season that Jordan Walker had in year one and then have a bad season the way that he did in year 2. So he's already had such an erratic and strange start to his career. It's hard to find very many comparisons for that, set aside what he does this year and if it keeps going in the same direction or if it trends back up. But I was looking for this because T-Mone's mentioned this a few different times where you don't see the up, down, and then back up again type of trajectory in Major League Baseball very often. And I don't have a counterpoint to that. I didn't know really. I think that's probably true. I just don't know based on the sample size, who are those guys? So I was looking for this earlier today, Alex. Who are the guys that have had the career trajectory that T-Bone is talking about? And I found a couple that stand out based on what they have done over the last decade. So I didn't want to go too far into the distance. Ketel Marte, your favorite player?
Oh, God, I love him.
Is one of these guys. Year one, he comes up to the big league level and has some success for Seattle. This is in 2015. He's a 21-year-old player. Sound familiar? Ends about 15% above league average. The next season goes back up to the major league level with Seattle. This is 2016. He's 22 years old, and he has an OPS plus 30% below league average offensively. Again, sound familiar? The next year, and this is my biggest fear with Jordan Walker, Ketel Marte goes to the Arizona Diamondbacks, and if I'm not mistaken, deals with injury that year and is basically league average offensively. The next season is basically league average offensively, but improves defensively and therefore has a lot of value for Arizona, and you're starting to see it click. He's closer to an 800 OPS. He had 12 triples that year, did some things at a high level, and then boom, 25 years old, hits 330 for the 2019 season, 330, has an OPS of near 1,000, and is 50% above league average. He's an all-star, fourth in the MVP candidacy. It all clicked into place, but he was 25 years old, and that was really year 5 of him being in the big leagues. We're about to start year 3 for Jordan Walker. That is why I caution, do not get too low on this guy. Do not say you're all in or all out based on what happens this year, because it could be closer to league average offensively, and you start to see some signs. You see an uptick in what he's going to do offensively, and maybe it takes until he's 25 years old to see that true breakout season, the way that it did for Ketel Marte. Michael Brantley was somewhat similar as well, a little bit of a later breakout for him in his career. Alex, when you see a couple of the comparisons for what we could see with Jordan Walker, how does that make you feel about what's at stake this season for him?
It makes me feel optimistic. I mean, the Ketel Marte is the one that really gets me, because I do really like Ketel Marte, and he was a guy that didn't get it early on. He was a younger player, and sometimes this is the part that I always have to remind myself, because I fall victim to this. You get out on a player because you expect when they're a top prospect, they're supposed to be the greatest and come right up and have success. But, man, sometimes these guys, they don't mature athletically until they mature mentally. And like some of these guys have to become adults before they can actually get it as a pro athlete. And I think Ketel Marte is a perfect example of that. Sometimes you think you're gifted the talent and you could just bring it right up and it works. And sometimes you get smacked in the face. You hit rock bottom. I think if you're Jordan Walker, you've been at rock bottom, and the only way to go is up here. So yeah, I'm not going to be out on Jordan Walker. The hard part that you weigh as a fan is if you wait too long, you miss your opportunity to potentially get something back in return. But when he's 23 years old, I think I have to see this thing through. This isn't like we're talking about, a fringe prospect in terms of rankings that if you give up, maybe he turns out to be solid, but it was one of those things that you understand. Adolis Garcia is a perfect example, sure, right? Went away, but look, nobody would have thought that was going to happen. But for Jordan Walker, you got to see this thing through in your organization. You see this thing through until he is officially a bust in Major League Baseball, and that's when you move past it.
Yeah, that's where I agree. I've said
He's the one guy right now that I feel that way about. I don't feel that way about Gorman.
No,
I don't necessarily
with you.
feel that way about Newpart, because he's more about the injuries than it is anything else. He's a good player.
I've said this since I think it was last year's deadline when there was talk of like what should the Cardinals do, and there were some that said sell, some that said you push in, and I agree. I think Jordan Walker's the type of prospect that either lives and prospers in your system or lives and dies as St. Louis Cardinal and never ends up reaching his potential here in this organization. That's just the pure talent that he has. I will say, and though I am skeptical because, this is the one guy that we could really find. There's a couple other decent examples, but Marte's the best one that we could find. I also didn't spend a
ton of time. I just saw Ketel Marte was almost the perfect example. Yeah. We could probably find others.
It is hard to find a lot of guys that had this kind of trajectory. One thing that does fit into this real quick is, and this is why I do have hopes for Walker bouncing back, and it's what Eno had mentioned, and it's something that some of our fan base will not like to hear, is Walker hits the ball freaking hard. And I just went back and I looked at Ketel Marte's Baseball Savant page because I was curious. Did he have the same profile? That second year with the Seattle Mariners, was he hitting the ball hard? Guys, in his second year with Seattle, His average exit velocity, 6th percentile in all of baseball. Hard hit percentage, 3rd percentile in all of baseball. So what happens is when he has that huge breakout, 2021, hard hit percentage, 86th percentile. Average exit velo, 82nd percentile. So he was a guy that almost had more of the, and Carlson wasn't this bad, but more of the Carlson, which was, hey, I'm a switch hitter. I don't really hit the ball very hard. And you could kind of look at him and go, okay, is that really going to sustain? And all of a sudden he figured it out. He started to barrel the ball more, started to hit the freaking crap out of the baseball. Walker's already there. Walker's already got that part of his game there. It's more of just about, okay, laying off sliders away, which Marte has always had a high whiff rate in his career. And also the, hey, can we get the ball off the ground a little bit? Because that's when he'll be able to do damage. That's why I am still very high on him.
Yeah, I just could tell Marte had the swing decisions early on, didn't have the exit velo. And Walker has the exit velo, doesn't have the swing decisions. If you can figure that out, if you can have the right approach at the plate, I think it's still in there for him. It's just a matter of, can you get there? Somebody else on the YouTube chat, NY in the YouTube chat, said another guy to keep in mind is Jose Ramirez, who didn't really break out until his 5th season at the MLB level. He was 24 years old, and at that point had 56 doubles, and then just never looked back. The year before that, he had 46 doubles, so you could argue that was his true breakout season. But that was, again, year 4 of him being at the big league level. He was 23 years old at that point in time. Jordan Walker is 22. He's about to play his age 23 season. I'm not saying he's going to become this player. Aaron Judge didn't even make it to the big leagues in any meaningful way until he was 25. We are asking for some of these guys to be way too good, way too quickly. It takes time for them to mature physically and mentally, and for them to become the players that they're ultimately going to be. The Junk Drawer coming up next here on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Let's dive into the junk drawer today. Alex, are you a big Stephen A. Smith fan? I take you as somebody that would probably be a big fan of his work on First Take.
No. You take me wrong, sir. I don't like the yelling.
So, he gets upset sometimes.
Sometimes. I've never seen the guy happy.
It's kind of a shtick. He was on a podcast recently, and I don't know if you guys heard, but he's on a little bit of a battle with LeBron James.
That's
because
bad battle, man.
He called out LeBron for the way that he's been handling the Bronny situation, and then as is LeBron, in my opinion, is right, Stephen A. was at a Lakers game, and LeBron went up to him and called him out for it. We don't know exactly what was said in the meeting between the two guys, but it sure seems like it was basically, hey, leave my son's name out of your mouth. Like, you want to criticize me, go for it. But don't criticize me as a parent. My basketball ability is totally in play. Don't criticize me as a parent, and don't bring Bronny into this in that regard. Okay, you can disagree or agree with LeBron. I feel like it's at least in his right to be able to say that to Stephen A.
It is, but don't walk away from the huddle in the middle of a game to do it. Like, you have the ability to talk to him outside of the game. I know why you're doing it in the game, because you want the publicity with it.
Sure. But either way, I think it was fine for him to do that. Stephen A. Smith thought it was fine for him to do that. He said so publicly in his first 3 reactions to LeBron talking to Stephen A. And then he was on a podcast and decided, you know what? I'm going to take a different tune here.
Nice.
Take a listen.
You said you fucking with my son. No, I wasn't. I was talking about you. I was talking about you. Wasn't about your son. I know he's number 55. I know he got work to do. Woo. I believe that he got potential. Yeah. I believe that he got the potential to go pro. I truly believe that. It's going to be tough, but I think he could pull it off. And by the way, I'm rooting for him. I ain't rooting against nobody, but I was talking about your ass. Mm-hmm. You did this. Mm-hmm. You the one that had us as reporters, as a league, as an NBA franchise. All of us got to sit back and be quiet and capitulate to your shit.
Come on now.
You did that.
He used a couple of words. I don't know what they mean. So, like, capitulate?
Basically, stand down. Like, you win. I lose, you win. That's effectively what it means.
Okay. Lower the terms a little bit, Steven.
Amen.
If you're going to go on a rant, I got to understand what you're ranting
Some
about.
of us only went to JUCO college.
Amen. Well, I didn't.
Oh.
D1, Lindenwood.
Why is this a problem? I think...
Because it's ratings. Because you're starting soap operas.
By the way, that's courtesy of the Gilbert Arenas podcast.
Yeah, Stephen A. Smith. No,
Gilbert Arenas has a podcast.
Dude, all the NBA.
Yeah, everybody does. Stephen A. Smith knows how to work this landscape. This is why he's one of the highest paid guys.
Can I be honest? I think both of them were well within the right of what they were saying. Stephen A. couldn't criticize LeBron. It's his job. It sucks that that's the case. Like, if you're LeBron, I could totally see how it's annoying that somebody on television is talking about not only you as a basketball player, but also you as a father. That is super annoying. Also, LeBron, when you went about it the way that you did with Bronny, and you made it very clear that you want to play with Bronny, and it felt as though, even if it wasn't true, it felt as though you were arranging the chairs to make sure Bronny was a Laker. That is something that you asked for, is the criticism. That's what comes with this. When you put a chosen one tattoo on your back and you are the king, self-entitled the king, like, all of this brings this kind of criticism. And I'm the biggest LeBron honk you'll ever see. But this is the criticism that comes with all of those things, right or wrong. And if you're Stephen A. and you are the way that you are, I respect that he goes to games. I do appreciate that. You should show up. You should make yourself available. And if LeBron comes over to you and says, I don't appreciate the way that you talked about me and my son, that's also okay. Dude, this is the system working. Like, those two guys both did their job the way that they're supposed to, and then everybody can go their separate ways. What's annoying is this part of it. Stephen A., you did your job. You criticized. LeBron did his job of reacting to your criticism and talking to you about it as a man. Now you both go your separate ways. Why can't we do that now? Why is that a problem?
Because ratings need to happen, and ratings happen with soap operas. Yeah. And I mean, I'm with you. Like, I don't feel like, as a parent, yes, you don't want somebody talking ill about your family, and you step up for your family. But my family's also not in the spotlight in the NBA. You know, like, and you're doing this, so the narrative is going to be there regardless. Again, I have no problem on either side of this. This is Stephen A. Smith trying to make content, and I can understand it. My bigger issue was in the middle of a basketball game. Like, I think this could have been handled prior to the game, after the game. Though? Because I don't think you're talking about it this much.
Well, Stephen A would make sure that you're talking about
probably, but I don't
know
think
if it's private. I don't know if he would.
Yeah, I don't know if he would. I don't think he'd be taking. The reason it's on First Take the next day is because everybody saw what took place.
I don't know when else LeBron would have been able to go up to Stephen A. Because Stephen A. walks into the game after the game has started, and he walks out of the game.
But you got his phone number. You got his phone number. You could talk to him, and I know you probably want to do it in person. Set something up, like. That's just the part for me.
I just don't think that matters at all.
That's just the part for me where it felt like we were doing like a Real Housewives of Los Angeles, where we're trying to make sure the cameras are always around for this.
But that's what Stephen A. does as well.
And that's why he's going on podcasts stirring the pot even more, because more people are going to listen when he's stirring the pot.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Alex. I think this doesn't have to be out there in the public, but why? And I'm not even blaming Stephen A. because LeBron is the one that went up to him during the basketball game. So LeBron actually is the one who kind of leads to what we're at now, which is hey, Stephen A's going everywhere talking about it. Hey, man, once it's out there in the public, Stephen A, I mean, Alex said it perfectly. Dude, he knows how to do this. He knows how to get the clicks and knows how to keep people's attention. And you know what? People love a good feud. Yep. People love it.
People love drama.
Stephen A is just going into it now and playing into it. So that's how we got here. But you know what? I agree with you guys. I mean, it's the right for both of them.
Don't ever argue with a guy that buys ink by the barrel. That's effectively what LeBron did. You've never heard that quote?
No. Okay. What did you hear that? The 90s?
I'm talking from
Do you buy ink by the barrel?
Yeah. The idea is if somebody has a public platform, you shouldn't argue with them because they're going to be able to use that public platform to say whatever it is they want, and then you have to respond in little itty bits. It's like you can respond to them either be like a phone call if you're on a radio show or in person the way that LeBron did. But they are the ones that have this massive platform, and they'll be able to say for dozens of hours on live television over the course of the week for Stephen A. Smith, everything it is that comes to their mind with their stream of thought consciousness. It's not an easy argument to win whenever you're going up against Stephen A. Smith. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we continue our countdown to the 20 most important Cardinals for 2025. It feels like this has been a little bit of a theme of our list. Not sure this guy's going to play for the Cardinals in 2025. That's just the way that it goes this season, given where the team is at. But next, we got to talk a little bit about Jimmy Snuggerud. There was an interesting thought yesterday from Jamie Rivers on the Fast Lane. How does Jimmy Snuggerud fit into this team's plans, not just for next year, but the rest of this season? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. So yesterday I was listening to the Fast Lane, and suddenly they were talking, I think this was during Blues Cues, if I'm not mistaken. Jamie was talking about first what you do with Broberg and Holloway. Said both should get 8-year extensions. That's his opinion, not necessarily reporting, but that's his opinion on what should happen this offseason. We talked about that a little bit earlier today. We agree. If they want 8-year extensions, go ahead and get it done right now. It's probably going to cost you more in terms of the AAV than it would to do a shorter-term deal because the cap is spiking the way that it is. But if they can do it, let's get it done right now. The other thing that he was asked about, Alex, was Jimmy Snuggerud and how he fits into the lineup the rest of this season. Go ahead and take a listen to his answer on that.
If the Blues are still playing this well in late March and April, where would Jimmy Snuggerud fit into the lineup?
Yeah, probably not. Probably not.
Oh, he wouldn't fit into the lineup.
He wouldn't. If they're playing this good, why would you disrupt anything?
Right.
And Jimmy Snuggerud has never played a pro hockey game before. So who are you taking out? Because he's a right winger.
Yeah.
So you'd have to take out Jordan Kyrou.
No.
Pavel Buchnevich.
No.
And you think Zach Bolduc, but look how well he's played.
He's played great.
He's played great. Jimmy Snuggerud's going to start out where Zach Bolduc started last year.
Which is the AHL.
Okay, cool. Jimmy Snuggerud's not signing with your team then.
What?
I mean, there's a spot that he fits. It doesn't matter where you think he fits or where you don't think he fits. He's in your lineup because he's a goal scorer. And these guys that you mentioned, yes, they're right wingers. They could play the left wing. Like Bolduc has played the left wing this season. Pavel Buchnevich has played pretty much every position except goaltender at some point this season. So, like, they're not stuck to that line combination. I mean, for me, I think it's an easy one. Matthew Joseph comes out and Zach Bolduc shifts to the left wing.
I do think there is a conversation to be had here. Because I'm with you. I agree. If Snuggerud says he wants to sign, you sign him and you get him into the lineup. He's going to be a part of your team, not just for the right now, but for the future. And this season was supposed to be about that more than anything else. But there is a conversation to be had because we've talked about, hey, do you potentially put him on that top line? The top line's been playing great.
Yeah, no, I don't put him on the top line right away.
So you don't disrupt the top line.
No.
Second line's too good to break up.
No.
So you're talking about that third line. Do you have him on that line? They have at times been an identity line for the Blues lately. Like, do you put that, I think they call it the 70 line. If you put that line out there, you feel pretty good about what they're giving you. Are you willing to break that up for the potential upside of Jimmy Snuggerud? Is that something you're comfortable with taking Matthew Joseph, who might be a part of that identity, out of the lineup with how he works, and you potentially have somebody that's a little bit less physical in there with Jimmy Snuggerud?
Absolutely, because you know what? If it doesn't work, then you can pull him out of the lineup. And if we're only talking about one game and that one game comes down to it, then I'm going to accept my fate in this one. But to me, the reason that has been such an identity line, yeah, everybody plays the same way, but you've got Zach Bolduc, who is a legit scoring threat on that line that creates that offense for you. And if you put a Jimmy Snuggerud there, you're not asking him to do something he's not uncommon to. Like, that's the one thing I do disagree with what Jamie's saying. And I've never been a pro hockey player, so he knows more than me. But just talking to guys, college hockey and juniors hockey are two very different entities. Guys that have played college hockey going into the NHL typically fit into the system pretty easily because college hockey emulates the NHL a little bit easier than what juniors does, because juniors, we've heard a lot of these guys talk about, right? Pond hockey, where you're just able to deke around these guys and make these highlight reel plays to create offense. There's no structure to it. NCAA is very much where there's structure to the style of hockey. Snuggerud already knows how to play a physical brand of hockey. Snuggerud knows how to do two ways of the ice compared to juniors. Yes, he's going to take a spot of Matthew Joseph, but I'm not trying to take anything away from Matthew Joseph. But what Matthew Joseph does is he goes out there and he buys into the forecheck. And if you're Jimmy Snuggerud and you're joining this team, you buy into the system that's in place and you go out there and you try and emulate it. And this isn't something that has never happened before. I mean, go down the list of these guys. Matthew Nyes a few years ago stepped in with 3 final games of the regular season. This is what the lineup looks like before Matthew Nyes joined the Toronto Maple Leafs at the end of the year. Michael Bunting, Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, Nick Robertson, Tavares, Nylander, Yarncroke, Ryan O'Reilly, and Alex Kerfoot. That was their top 9. Is there a spot for a guy who's never played an NHL game before?
Where did he end up?
He ended up on the top line with Matthews and Marner.
I was just curious.
Brock Faber stepped out of the stepped out of college hockey when his team, I think they either won the national championship or they lost in the finals. Played the final 2 games for Minnesota, who were in a playoff wild card race at the time. Brock Faber stepped in. Let me read you the top 6 defensemen for the Minnesota Wild. Jared Spurgeon, Matt Dumba, Kalen Addison, Jonas Brodin, Jacob Middleton, John Merrill. There's a spot for him in that lineup?
Oh, Jacob Middleton, unfortunately. That's my guy. But
that was your guy.
Please tell me that's who he took the job for.
He took John Merrill's job, and John Merrill was an established pro, and Faber stepped in a third pair role. So is he a little bit of a step off if this team has been playing well and you're disrupting the chemistry? Absolutely. But you know why I'm putting him in the lineup? Because he's a difference maker when the puck's on his stick. So, to me, it's not even a question. Yeah, he's in your lineup, and he's playing in that third line where Matthew Joseph is.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. I want to continue this on the other side because we're getting a little pushback on this, Alex.
Wow.
There are a lot of people that disagree with you, and I would imagine a lot of that is because of what Jamie said yesterday on the show. Totally understandable. I think there's an interesting conversation to be had here. When you're having this kind of success and you're having this kind of chemistry with your line combinations, do you potentially upset the apple cart for the ceiling that exists with Jimmy Snuggerud? We'll talk about that a little bit more coming up next here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. So we're having the conversation that was spurred by what Jamie said yesterday on the Fast Lane about, not Matthew Nyes, about Jimmy Snuggerud, who could potentially be inserted right into the Blues lineup after he is done with his college season. And that would mean that he's in the lineup during the Blues playoff push, potentially. And that's received some pushback. Alex said this is an obvious move. You got to do it. Jamie said this is an obvious move. You absolutely cannot do it. And I think there are some, I would say myself, that are somewhere in between. I lean more towards Alex's direction. If Jimmy Snuggerud says, I want to go to the NHL level, I'm ready, I think the only way he does that is if you put him into the lineup right away. And I think that's worth it to get him into the mix. And you just don't have to worry about the decision that could take place over the next few weeks. So I would do it. We did get this text, Alex. Somebody said, do you guys think that he compares favorably to what Matthew Nyes was when he was inserted into the lineup for the Toronto Maple Leafs down the stretch? The answer is yes. Now, it's a little different because Matthew Nyes did this after his sophomore season. But in his sophomore season, he had 21 goals, 21 assists. That's 42 points in 40 games played. It's almost a one-for-one comparison with Jimmy Snuggerud, who is in his third year at the collegiate level right now. 22 goals, 27 assists, 49 points in 39 games. So he has an extra goal, 5 or 6 extra assists in 1 fewer games played than what Matthew Nyes did in his second year at the collegiate level. That's when he went to the NHL level and was a participant for the Toronto Maple Leafs, both down the stretch and into the postseason. So, yeah, he does compare favorably to what Matthew Nyes was at that point in time. Stylistically, how do they play? Who they are mentally, that's hard to say. Yeah, how that'll translate to the NHL level until you actually see it. It's why the draft is so difficult to project. But, Alex, to restate where your stance is on this, have you seen any arguments on the text line, YouTube chat, that convince you at all, hey, maybe there is this piece of the argument that does dissuade me a little bit?
No, I haven't. And I've seen a couple on the Air Comfort Service text line that are bringing up, why would you take Zach Bolduc off of his natural position to put Snuggerud in? First of all, Zach Bolduc's natural position is center. Played it throughout his junior career. It's what got him drafted. And he's played 15 games this season on the left wing. So a natural centerman who can play on either wing, you're not taking him off of his natural position. The same can be said off of like a Pavel Buchnevich. You're not taking him off of his natural position. He's playing the right wing because Jake Neighbors is more comfortable on his left wing. Is Bolduc more comfortable on his right wing? Probably, but he's been in the NHL long enough to where I think he can adapt on either side of this thing. And yeah, I'm going to put a Snuggerud in the position that he's most comfortable with. The other one is bringing up the style that Matthew Joseph plays, and Jimmy Snuggerud doesn't play that style. I agree with that. Matthew Joseph is a physical specimen. He's a forechecker. He's a guy that brings the physicality to the game. But you know what Jimmy Snuggerud brings? He brings the difference of one shot. And where are you weakest at? You're weakest on depth on offense, and you're weakest on the power play. And guess what you don't really need to be scheme ready for? You on the power play. You put a Jimmy Snuggerud out there who has that one-timer that can play. So I get where people are coming from. You don't want to disrupt the chemistry, especially if we're talking about one game. I don't think it's going to be one game. I could be wrong here, but I don't think Snuggerud's team's going to be going all the way to the championship round after them getting bounced in the first round of the Big Ten tournament. So we're talking about maybe 4 or 5 games for Snuggerud, or maybe 3 or 4 games for Snuggerud. You do not pass up on the opportunity to put a guy who can be a difference maker with the puck on his stick into your lineup, even if you're in a playoff race, because that can be very beneficial for that player. So I look at a lot of the other guys that have done this to where they've leapt from college into the NHL. Kyle Connor is another one who went at the end of his college hockey season with Michigan right into the NHL, jumped right into the lineup. Cale Makar did this. And I'm not saying he's going to be any of these guys, but these are guys that played well in college and then went into the NHL and acclimated very quickly. And Jimmy Snuggerud, despite what you think of him, Snuggerud is one of the top goal scorers in college hockey right now. He's going to be up for the Hobey Baker Award. You put him in the lineup if he's available for you, and you bring that offense into the third line.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Guys, if they did go this way, what would be the move for the Blues? How would they make the roster work? That's just Texier, right?
Yeah.
You put Texier through waivers, and Matthew Joseph becomes your 13th forward, or you bumped him down.
Don't you get an expanded roster at this point, too?
Well, you do get a call-up, but you don't get – those are black aces that can't play. But what you do is I think you put Parayko on LTIR.
That's another scenario.
Because then it opens up another roster spot for, because he's not on LTIR. He's just on IR for you right now. They brought up Kessel because they had that roster spot available to him. But yeah, I mean, worst case scenario,
either way,
you do a Texier or something.
Texier goes through waivers and you make it work that way. Because Texier is probably not going to be on this roster next year.
Correct.
Dvorsky, Snuggerud, you're going to have other additions. I would be pretty surprised if Texier is around next season, so that's probably the move.
And look, like looking at Matthew Nyes' first couple of games with Toronto after his hockey season was over, he only played like 12, 13 minutes a game. You're not putting him in ideal situations. You're picking and choosing. He played on the line with Matthews and Marner, but guess what? As the game got deeper, you start to see Nyes switch shifts a little bit. You put guys up there that are a little bit more acclimated with it.
I do think this is harder than it's just like a plug-and-play situation. I don't think this is a easy, no doubt about it, like you got to put him into the lineup and he immediately becomes a top-line player for you. I do think if your chemistry is where it's at right now, and you go into it that way, it can be a difficult thing to do as a coach, is figure out how to handle this. Because, like, on the power play, this team isn't great on the power play right now, and his shot can absolutely help them. But typically, those things take time to develop. We've seen this before, where it can take a little while before you have guys that are all playing on the same page. And if you're doing that and you have, let's call it 4 games to play before you get into a potential playoff push, is that enough time to develop that chemistry? I think there are some legitimate questions about this. I would lean towards do it. Because if you have the opportunity to get your top prospect in this kind of a situation where he learns about himself, think about what it was for Mason Wynn 2 years ago to come up here the final 3 weeks, I think it was, of the Cardinal season and just learn where he was at relative to Major League pitching. He looked completely overmatched, had no chance against Major League Baseball pitching. Went into the offseason, knew how he needed to adjust, and was able to do so in the offseason. Came back last year, looked like a different hitter. That is really important to find out, where am I deficient? What part of my game works at this level? What part of my game still needs work to get to that level? That is something that you can learn over a 4 or 5 game stretch in the NHL. That's 5% of the season. So if he has that opportunity, I do think you potentially put him in there just for his sake, more so even than anybody on the Blues side.
And this is again, the part that I just disagree with on Jamie's perspective. And again, I'm disagreeing with an NHLer, so I could be completely wrong with this.
Though.
But talking to guys that have made this jump before, and Joey's a perfect example of it. Joey always says playing in the AHL is just, it's like a tornado. Nobody has specific roles. They're just out there and they're trying to create offense. That to me is what juniors hockey is. Juniors hockey is a lot of, you're just in the offensive zone. You're creating opportunities. The better team is going to have the puck a lot more. College hockey is just not that. And somebody texted in, I'm assuming it was Snark version, saying, do you guys even watch any Jimmy Snuggerud? I've seen 3 games. Yeah, I've watched a lot of the Jimmy Snuggerud stuff this season because I'm curious. Yes, he stands in one spot and he takes shots. Guys, I hate to break it to you, but this is what goal scorers do in the NHL. They stand in one spot and they wait for their opportunities.
I know Darren Payne got a lot of crap for it. He was right with what he said earlier.
He knows exactly what he's talking about.
What he said earlier this week about Alex Ovechkin, that he's a quote-unquote one-trick pony, there's some truth to that. Now, he's maybe the best to ever do that one trick,
right?
Which is pretty damn valuable. Like, if you're a home run hitter that has one trick, your trick is I hit 45 home runs a year, that's a really good trick to be good at, man. Yeah. You'll get paid $20 million a year for your entire major league career because of that one trick. If you're an NBA player and you can make 40% of your three-point shots, you just stand in the corner, do not move, that's your role. Dude, you'll get paid a boatload of money for 15 years to do that trick. So there are certain things. Dude, Marquez Valdez-Scantling does one thing well. He runs fast in a straight line. Guess what? He just got $6 million from the Seahawks to do that trick. If Jimmy Snuggerud can stand in the circle and score 30 goals a year for his entire NHL career and does nothing else well, that draft pick was a huge win, and he should absolutely be a part of this team.
I mean, you're not asking him to come in and play 21 minutes a night and do what Robert Thomas is doing. You're asking him to come in and provide depth down the middle of your lineup. And I feel as if college hockey players, especially a guy who has played in college for the last 3 years, it's a more structured system that when you step into the NHL, you can fit in a little bit easier than what a junior's. You rarely see a guy that finishes his junior's year go right to the NHL because they have to figure out how to acclimate to the NHL, which is why you see him in the AHL. I could be off on this. You're not asking him to be Brett Hall. You're not asking him to be Vladimir Tarasenko. You're asking him to come in, play to the system that the Blues play, which he's going to sit in practice sessions prior to the game. And when he steps onto the ice, do what you do best. Drive offense, get into the zone, put shots on net. I tweeted out from a guy who works for a scouting group in the NHL, Jimmy Snuggerud, in terms of driving plays and expected goals and expected shots on goal, he's in the 90th percentile in all of these. So, the guy drives offense. And guess what? For a team that's trying to make the playoffs, I will take all of the offense that I can have.
He's Alex, it's T-Bone, I'm BK. If you guys have missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Schaefer Door Company.
The 101 ESPN app is free to download. It is super easy to use. You can, again, check all of the podcast out over there, and that is presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. You can find our 20 most important Cardinals players countdown over there on the podcast page after the show today, and you'll be able to hear number 13 on that list coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Blues will be back in action tomorrow night as they visit the Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 5 o'clock tomorrow night with Alex Ferrario, then puck drop at 6 o'clock with the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. Cardinals currently in spring training action as they are taking on the New York Mets, and they trail 1-0 heading to the bottom of the 7th. The Sports Update was brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. There's not much more for Quinn Matthews to prove down in the minor leagues, but I think that's where he's going to begin this upcoming season. I think it's the right move. He needs to go down to AAA. Let's see at least a month of him there before we can find out, is this guy truly ready for the big league level? Last year, he was amazing. 26 starts, 3.0 ERA, excuse me, 2.75 ERA, had 145 innings as well. There was really nothing that he didn't accomplish down to the minor league level. He had a high strikeout rate. He didn't really walk anybody. He never gave up a whole lot of runs up until the time that he got to the AAA level. And he has said, my body kind of broke down by the end of the season. I didn't have a whole lot left in me. 4 starts, had a 6.5 ERA down at the AAA level. But before then, again, he was great. 1.5, 2.7, 2.4 ERA at the 3 levels that he had seen prior to AAA. Alex, when I look at Quinn Matthews and what he could be for the Cardinals this year, my hope is he becomes a mid-rotation starter for you. I don't think he's going to be a guy that ends up as a number 1 or 2. I don't know that his strikeout rate is going to maintain the way that it was down in the minor league level, and I think that prevents you from being that front-end starter. But he could be your number 3, and you feel really good about it for years to come. So this might actually end up being low on our list. I had him at 17 just because I don't know how much he's going to affect your team this year. You had him all the way up at number 12, and T-Bone was at number 10 for Quinn Matthews. He levels out at number 13 overall. How do you view Quinn Matthews, what he can be for this team in 2025?
I view him as being kind of a catalyst for what they're trying to accomplish, and that's a young, cost-controlled, top-end pitcher. I don't think he's going to come up here and be an ace, a number 1, or even a number 2. But I think you're going to see the upside of swing and miss with Quinn Matthews. You're going to see the upside of a guy that is going to be a top half of your rotation pitcher for years to come. And that's where, once again, I did my measurements of impacting 2025 and beyond. That's why I had him so high. I don't think he starts the year. Frankly, he's not starting the year with the Cardinals. I think by the time we hit May or June, you're going to start to see conversations swirl around Quinn Matthews. And by the end of this season, I think you're going to be talking about him being towards the top of your rotation because of the stuff that he provides. Cost-controlled pitchers that fit well into your rotation gives you the opportunity to spend money elsewhere. And that's where I think he's going to impact your team.
Yeah, I had a very tough time originally trying to figure out where I wanted to put him because I tried to balance the winning at 25 along with like the development of these guys. And then I decided, you know what, he actually impacts both of those potentially because development-wise, you're not going to get like firm answers on what his ceiling is going to be, but you hope to get some positive return this year, whether that is he just spends the year at AAA and you see him bounce back from what I agree, body ran down on him at AAA, as he said, long season for the young left-hander. You see good returns there, maybe get a couple spot starts like we saw like McGreevy, Graceffo have, and you go, okay, we can dream on some of that stuff. Or, and this is where it can impact their winning, is not only do you get those positive returns, but he starts here sooner than you're expecting, whether that's injuries or, damn, he looks great at AAA. What ends up happening is that's a guy that has a ceiling that can potentially give you that number 2 that compare with Sonny Gray, and that's how you can really start winning baseball games in 2025, is a guy with Sonny Gray's caliber, along with a rookie that potentially has just wipeout stuff from that left side.
How would you feel if he becomes Jaime Garcia? If I told you can lock it in today, he's going to become the next Jaime Garcia for the St. Louis Cardinals.
I hope he has a longer lifespan than what Jaime Garcia is, but I would take the style of that pitcher, though. I mean, Jaime Garcia always felt like a guy who was towards the top of your rotation.
In 8 years with the Cardinals, Jaime Garcia had 900 innings pitched for you, and he had a 3.57 ERA.
And really good swing and miss stuff, if I'm not mistaken.
Not really.
Yeah.
7.3 per 9.
Well, I thought he had that.
It felt that way because the entire Cardinal staff was not exactly a swing and miss Steph, but
in baseball at that point when he was pitching, that was really good. If you tell me that he's got the better swing and miss and has those numbers, I would sign up for that. I would say, I'd press the button now and say I would take him. That would be a number 240 with better swing and miss, 3.5 ERA. That's the kind of guy that can really play for you, and especially, as Alex has said, when he's cost controlled.
The reason I bring it up, I think you should smash the button.
Smash it?
To take this for Quinn Matthews. I think the overwhelming likelihood is he's not that good. He's not as good as Jaime Garcia. Because Jaime Garcia was a really freaking good pitcher, man. Now, he had his issues, his belly ache sometimes, and he ended up having to miss starts for it and whatnot.
The belly aches.
He wasn't exactly a guy that was the most durable, so you had your issues with Jaime Garcia, and I totally understand that. Jaime, when he was out there, though, was really freaking good. Really good. And I think we hype these prospects up, and then we only knock them down once they get to the big league level. If you could sign up for that today, I think you would. Michael Wacha's another one. If you could sign up for that today, I think you probably should. Now, these are guys that had some injury concerns, but every pitcher, for the most part at this point in time, has injury concerns. If you can get the effectiveness out of Quinn Matthews that those guys were able to get, I think you take it. The reason why I bring those two up, one, the lefty junk thrower, more pinpoint accuracy than it is like crazy blow it by you stuff. That's the comparison to Jaime Garcia, what he was for you. And for the Michael Wacha one, his best pitch was a changeup. Quinn Matthews' best pitch appears to potentially be the changeup for him as well. He's got a few pitches that work off of each other, but there's not a ton of pitchers in Major League Baseball that could work off of that. So I think that's probably the type of starter that you're looking for, a number 3. And if he becomes that, man, I feel great about it. Because now you've got potentially for 2026, top of your rotation, Sonny Gray. Number 3, Quinn Matthews. Number 4, Andre Palante. Number 5, Michael McGreevy. You hope TK Roby eventually works his way into that mix. You hope that eventually Tink Hintz can work into that mix. And maybe you trade one of your position players to get that number 2 starter locked in there. Now you're feeling pretty good about where your rotation is, and you can make up for whatever you're paying to that number 2 starter because of how little you're paying for Matthews, McGreevy, and Palante. That is what the Cardinals have truly been missing in recent seasons, is their complete inability to develop those 3 through 5 starters for their rotation. They're spending $40-50 million on those guys right now.
And what that does is it opens up opportunities for a team to spend money in other areas to make your team better. So that's why I had him so high. I do find him a very interesting piece for this team, not so much for the success of 2025, although if you see bad results from a lot of these starting pitchers, then maybe you just go heavily into this youth movement and let these guys get some reps, because we've seen Quinn Matthews. He doesn't really need to prove you anything else in the minors, but more so by the end of 2025, you look at it and you say, man, we got another high-end pitcher that's going to make our rotation better than what it's been.
Somebody on the text line said, guys, this year, Quinn Matthews could be for you what Spencer Schwellenbach was for the Atlanta Braves last year. I think that's what the Cardinals should be hoping. If he can do that for you, you feel really good about it. Schwellenbach last year came straight up to the big league level from Double-A. He was having a ton of success down there, and he was great for the Braves at the big league level. 3.5 ERA for them, pitched 125 innings, was right around what you're looking for the strikeout rate as well. Yeah, if you could get that out of Quinn Matthews, I think I would sign up for it today. That's the hope of what Quinn can do for you at the big league level this year. All right, with Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. We'll hit the rewind coming up next here on 101 ESPN. with Alex and T-Bone on BK. Hey, Selection Sunday's almost here. Get signed up now to play in this year's Bracket Madness Pick'em Challenge at 101ESPN.com. Free to enter, and this year's top scorer will take home a $250 Amazon gift card and a 101 ESPN prize pack. See the contest rules and sign up to play right now at 101ESPN.com. The Bracket Madness Pick'em Challenge is refreshed by Bud Light. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Again, if you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check out the podcast page after the show today. College basketball is in action right now. Arkansas up 61-56 in the SEC tournament. That's the big game that's taking place. North Carolina is absolutely wiping the floor with Notre Dame early on in that one. 17-5 is the update, and I know all of you are curious. Rice is in a tight one. Charlotte has been coming roaring back in this one in a battle of a 10-21 team versus a 13-18 team. Tied at 52 with 4 to play. It is snug between Charlotte and Rice.
My $100 bet on Rice isn't looking too good right now.
It's a barn burner, by the way. Fordham versus Rhode Island. Fordham, 47 points in the first half. Watch out for the over in that one against Rhode Island.
Boy, I tell you what.
Would you really use a barn burner for that?
47 points with 2 minutes to go in the first half? Yeah, that's a barn burner.
I don't think that's a barn burner. It's a slobber knocker, maybe.
Yeah, let me tell you.
That one is Grambling versus Southern, which is 29-21 at half.
I've always said Grambling is the epitome of a slobber knocker.
Ooh, that's
Cool. So not really college basketball on right now.
BK did not mention what the best non-Power 4 game was today. You know, the best one is the one you can hear on 101 ESPN tonight.
Patriot League.
Patriot League. Navy taking on American University.
Who you got?
Oh, I'm going with the midshipmen, baby.
I don't know. American 21-12 on the year.
Yeah,
they're 3.5 point favorite in this one. I think I've got American to take this one down.
I like Navy
My
plus
cousin went to
155.
American.
Did he?
Yeah.
Your cousin's American?
He is American, and he went to American University. So
cool.
You know, 13-5 in the Patriot League. I think they've got this one.
I didn't even know that was university.
I didn't either. I didn't either. I think you made it
to
up.
finish out the show today with our rewind, as we do each and every day here on BK and Ferrario.
Well, timing says we got another 5 minutes.
So let's go back to the Open, which was our conversation about Robert Thomas. Jim Montgomery was on with the Fast Lane yesterday. Really good interview with them, and said, hey, Robert Thomas is the one that's driving the bus. He's the guy that is leading to all of this success. Alex, what have you seen that has changed in Robert Thomas's game? Obviously, it's the health that has allowed this to take place, but what have you seen that looks different to you?
It's the defensive side of the game, and I don't even know if it looks different because it looks like what it looked like last year. It looks like what it looked like prior to his injury, but he's back to being the shutdown centerman for the Blues, and Monty even said it on the interview, like, you create your offense from how well you play defensively, and I went through the list earlier, but when all of these opponents that they have taken on, you could go through almost every single team and look at the points that the top players earn, and it's a big goose egg because that's what Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich have been doing. The offense is coming because he is eliminating the opportunities in the offensive zone for the opposition. And when they got nothing, the Blues can transition, and they've got the forecheck. And I think the style that all three play works really well for the Blues. Pavel Buchnevich is on his game as that puck hound. You've got Neighbors as the net front presence, and Thomas does the rest. So he's back to being the Selke-esque type of centerman that we've all expected. And I agree with what Monty said. Like, this is a guy that at some point he's going to put up a 100-point season for how well he plays. It's just a matter of staying healthy and staying consistent.
Robert Thomas basically had a bad month during his season.
January.
He had 15 games in which he had 4 goals, 4 assists, and was a -9 on the ice for the Blues.
And that was, to me, fatigue on the injury that just caught up with him. And it was also, I think, trying to get past the mental anguish of not being a part of the Four Nations roster.
So in the rest of the season, he has, let's see here, 38 games played, 13 goals, which would be a 25 to 30 goal pace over the course of the season, 31 assists, which would be a pace of 80. 65 assists over the course of the season, and his plus minus would be...
Yeah, that's going to be a really good.
Plus 16.
Yeah, there's a Selke Trophy guy right there for you.
It was a bad month. He had a really, really bad month. And in it, when you were in it, it was like, oh, dude, you're never going to get out of this thing. Like, this is brutal. It's trending in the wrong direction.
I always believed.
It's awful. Before and after, he has looked like a 100-point player, a Selke Trophy winner. Like, he has looked every bit the part of a legitimate number one center for not just a contender, but a Stanley Cup contender.
That's 2 Ferrario 5s that were correct.
Pretty damn impressive. You look like you have a number one center. Colton Parayko looks the part of a number one defenseman, and you have a number one goalie. It's about filling things out from there. We talked earlier today about whether or not you re-sign long-term both Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg. You can hear our conversation on that over on the podcast page. And we talked about whether or not Jimmy Snuggerud should be a part of this thing down the stretch. We gave you our thoughts. Jamie gave you his yesterday on their show as well. So if you want to check any of that out, be sure to do so over on the podcast page. 101ESPN.com and the free 101 ESPN app is where you can go to find it. You can also check out our 20 most important Cardinals list over there. Today we got to number 13 with Quinn Matthews.
Let's check in on the Cardinals right now. Spring training action. How are they?
We'll talk about that tomorrow. Not freaking out just yet. Give me one more
Today
week.
mattered, though, right?
Yeah.
Today's game mattered. You said it.
Starting to matter.
It's against Paul Blackburn, by the way.
Oh, I've heard he's a Cy Young candidate.
It's starting to matter, and it's not going well. Do they have 2 hits yet?
No. Still one. Still one.
Stall for me for a moment.
You have 10 seconds.
I'll get this in. They do not. They have 1 hit going to the top of the 9th.
Well, it's got to be a bunch of backups in the lineup,
It's not
right?
what you want. It's not looking good. We'll talk about it tomorrow. The Fast Lane's coming up next here on 101 ESPN.